In such deep waters, Ling Han had no worry about the possibility that Ji Wuming could find him. Ji Wuming's battle prowess was indeed strong, but in terms of pure defense, Ling Han could guarantee that he was definitely the strongest of this cultivation level. Even Ji Wuming could only admit his inferiority, even if he was a ninth heaven celestial king in his last life. However, this was very, very, very boring. Ling Han was the only one here, and not only was the scenery eternally unchanging, there was not the slightest bit of sound, making this seem like a living hell. Fortunately, Ling Han could still enter into the Black Tower, where the 4 women could provide him some company inside. Another 300 years had passed, and the number of indigo grade yang soul stones that Ling Han had gathered had increased. The number was more or less 200, but he did not have a single purple grade yang soul stone. He was a little anxious by now. Half the time had already passed, but he could only eke out a fused purple grade yang soul stone. To say nothing of all of them having a natural purple grade yang soul stone, even for fused ones, he could just barely manage one. But what could he do about it? Ling Han remained patient, and swam at the ocean bed in search of the carcasses of marine creatures. Year passed after year. Time flew very quickly, and 7 colors had become 2 colors. The majority of light bands had become white, lighting up the whole ocean. Ling Han suddenly discovered that the ocean waters were gushing forwards. The surface of the ocean was not calm and undisturbed, but after venturing so deep into the ocean, everything had become incredibly peaceful, yet now a gushing water flow had suddenly appeared. That could only mean one thing. Either there was a massive marine creature that was charging over an assault, or a very great change had happened in this ocean. The current situation was the latter. A canyon had actually appeared in front of Ling Han. It was not very big, and its length was around 10 miles. Its entrance was very tiny, and then enlarged. The widest part was also about 10 miles wide, forming a triangular shape. The reason why there would be gushing water was because the ocean water was presently surging inwards this canyon, and that was why there was a pulling motion. Ling Han couldn't help but be curious. He moved with the flow and floated towards that canyon. When he arrived at the entrance of the canyon, he shockingly discovered that an invisible wall had appeared ahead of him, stopping him from moving forwards further, and aside from him, the ocean waters had been similarly blocked, which meant that the inside of the canyon was actually dry. This was extremely strange. Since the ocean waters could not enter into the canyon, how had this hidden flow of water formed? Ling Han rubbed his chin in thought for a while before decisively giving up this line of thought. There were too many inconceivable things in this world. To investigate each and every one of them was a completely impractical matter. Thus, there was no need for him to confuse himself over the reason for the formation of this canyon, but rather he should ponder how he was going to enter inside. At the bottom of the great ocean, a canyon that did not have ocean water had actually appeared. If it was claimed that there was nothing strange about this, who would believe it? Ling Han shot out a punch. Pong! The invisible wall in front of him immediately rippled, as if it was made out of liquid. It rose and fell continuously, and only after a long while did the undulations finally stop. It had not broken. Ling Han was shocked and shot out another punch. This time, he had used the regulation of slaughter, and the destructive power immediately spiked. Pong! The fist landed on the wall of water, causing a period of ripples, but the wall of water still did not break. Could it be that it could not be broken through? Ling Han was not willing to admit defeat. Using celestial techniques, he began a mad barrage of attacks. Boom! 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 He used all the celestial techniques he could use, but this invisible wall was indescribably tough. No matter how strong the force it sustained, it would not break. At most, it would only shake a few more times. Ling Han drew the divine demon sword. Since bare hands could do nothing, he would just use a celestial tool. Heaven-destroying 9 swords was channeled, and shwa! A strike was delivered on the wall of water. This time, the wall of water did not even ripple. Yet Ling Han looked elated. Water was most gentle, and even the strongest brute force was incapable of truly causing damage to it. That was because water could distribute the power it sustained over its entirety. Just now, the few punches that he had delivered were like that. They were clearly targeted at a single point, but ultimately, the force was absorbed by the entire Yang Soul Ocean. In this manner, no matter how strong Ling Han's strength was, he could not possibly destroy the Yang Soul Ocean, right? But now, he had drawn the divine demon sword, yet it was still undisturbed. It was not because the force had weakened, but rather all this force had truly landed on a single point, and the power had not seeped out to be shared by the entire Yang Soul Ocean. This point was the tip of the divine demon sword's blade. Ling Han roared, his hands pushing forward strongly. Ka-kaka, kaka-kaka. Multiple cracks appeared on the invisible wall, more and more, longer and longer, and then it finally shattered with a crash. Boom, ocean waters surged in, and Ling Han was also brought inside by the ocean waters. He immediately stood firm, and saw that the water beneath his feet was spreading out in front of him, but it was getting slower and slower. He turned his head and saw that the ocean waters that had surged in were becoming less and less because the hole that had been created was presently shrinking in size. This wall had self-recovery ability. Only in a short while, the invisible wall had completely recovered, and it was no longer visible to the naked eye. He only knew that this wall still existed because the ocean waters had been stopped, forming a block. Interesting, Ling Han murmured, feeling his whole body had become light. Because there was no ocean water here, there naturally would not have any water pressure, either. With a shake of his hand, the Empress, Hunyo, bewitching Maiden Ro, and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were released instantly. What is this place? Hunyo's big eyes blinked as she curiously surveyed the surroundings. Yang Soul Ocean? The Empress was also surprised, looking towards Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and replied, "This is still the ocean bed of the Yang Soul Ocean, but the environment here is more unique. There is a natural barrier that cuts off the ocean waters from this place." So interesting. Hunyo clapped her hands and laughed, looking like she had an urge to rush over and play around. Ling Han hurriedly pulled her back. This little girl was fond of food and liked to play, so it was definitely not just an idea for her. This place, what is it? Bewitching Maiden Ro looked around. Let's search around. The five of them split up a bit and began searching around in the canyon. This canyon was very small. It would not take too much time for even a normal human to take a tour, what more for elites like them. There seems to be something here. Hunyo stopped and pawed at the ground. Ling Han walked over and saw that a sharp spike had actually appeared from the ground. Upon first glance, it looked like a protruding stone pillar, though it was extremely sharp. But as Hunyo parted the pebbles and dirt around it, he discovered that this stone pillar was becoming longer and longer. Hunyo dug deeper and deeper, and this stone pillar became 3 meters tall from its original height of an inch. Finally, a massive skull actually appeared. This was the carcass of a gigantic living creature, buried in the dirt at the bottom of the canyon. Only the horn on its head was slightly exposed, which Hunyo coincidentally happened to spot. When this massive creature was completely excavated, Ling Han and his group could only look up at it. It was extremely colossal. Indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone. Hunyo immediately clapped her hands and extracted the Yang Soul Stone that was inside the skull of the massive creature. How could there possibly be the carcass of a marine creature here? Ling Han rubbed his chin in thought, and thinking about that previous gushing flow of water, he could not help but come up with a deduction. Could it be that, after the surrounding marine creatures died, the carcasses would all be delivered by the flow of water to this place? That wall, perhaps, does not block dead matter. Going by that theory, just how many Yang Soul Stones would there be in this canyon then? Ling Han and his group all became excited. They hurriedly split up and began digging around at the ground. "I found one! I found one too!" Their voices rang out in succession as they found carcasses of marine creatures. The majority of them were Heaven Soul corpses and had nurtured indigo-grade Yang Soul Stones, while a smaller portion was blue-grade. In the eyes of others, these would be ultimate treasures, but were now thrown disdainfully into their spatial god tools by Ling Han and his group. 200 was needed to be able to produce an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, so what was it if not useless? However, now that they had arrived here, they had not developed the habit of throwing them away. They simply stowed them away first. Going by the rate at which they were harvesting, they would only need 1 or 2 months' time for all of them to gain 200 indigo grade Yang Soul Stones, which they could then fuse into a purple grade one, and advance to the dividing soul tier with the highest grade of Yang Soul Stone. This should be the graveyard of the marine creatures. Those weaker existences had already decayed fully when they had been carried here by the ocean waters. Thus, those that could come here were at least Earth Soul in level, and could contribute blue-grade Yang Soul Stones. But even if others found out, so what? Would they be able to come here? No one's origin power and power of regulation could possibly hold on for so long. Before they could swim to a closer depth, they would have been crushed to bits by the water pressure. Only Ling Han could do what others could not. Here's a big guy. Ling Han dug at a spot, and after a portion of the corpse of a marine creature was exposed, he couldn't help but feel pleasantly surprised. This was a swordfish that was completely golden. Even if it had been dead for countless years, there was not the slightest sign of decay. Furthermore, there were multiple seals of great Tao on its body, exuding a majestic aura, as if it could show its might at any moment, suppressing eternity. The immortal palace tier. The 4 women rushed over, and all exclaimed in shock. Since Heaven Soul marine creatures could nurture indigo-grade Yang Soul Stones, then what about an immortal palace tier? Purple grade. You guys go on and look around further. There shouldn't be just a single immortal palace tier corpse here, Ling Han said. This underwater cemetery should not house just marine creatures that had died 100 million years ago, but would also have those that had died 200 million years ago, 300 million years ago. The accumulation over countless billions of years made this place become covered with treasure. And the 4 women all went their separate ways. Ling Han naturally was not of the mind to be bothered about the carcasses of other marine creatures. As long as he could dig out the Yang Soul Stone inside the swordfish, that would be a natural purple grade Yang Soul Stone, which was genuinely the highest grade. He delivered a stab with his sword, but the swordfish's eyeball was filled with flexibility. After slightly sinking in, 7 seals shone, instantly bouncing him backwards. The eyeball was not damaged. So tough. Ling Han was surprised. It should be known that even if it was an immortal palace tier elite, so what? Without being on guard, it was still completely susceptible to being killed by a severing mundane tier, unless it was someone like Ling Han who had a naturally strong physique and was always at the best state of defense. But this swordfish had already been dead for countless years, yet its defense was still so strong. It had to have been born with a naturally strong physique. Fuck. Isn't this just causing trouble for me? Ling Han sighed and tried to stow the swordfish into the black tower. He carefully extended his divine sense, wrapping it around the swordfish. Seals flickered vaguely on the swordfish's body, as if they had discovered Ling Han's actions. However, there was no powerful backlash, so Ling Han did not stop and continued to wrap his divine sense around it. This was indeed a big guy, but compared to the other giants of the ocean, its size was still relatively slender. After an hour, Ling Han showed a hint of elation. Success, he had completely wrapped his divine sense around this swordfish. Come on then. Xiao, this giant swordfish had disappeared without a trace. Naturally, it had entered into the Black Tower. With a flash, Ling Han followed it into the Black Tower. Though the present power of the Black Tower was also limited by his cultivation level, it was definitely considerably stronger than him. Furthermore, the power of the Black Tower was endless, and there was no need to worry about using it up. Small tower, come, give me a hand. Ling Han once again began to dissect the giant swordfish. Small tower slowly appeared and said, "Yo, what incredible luck. You actually found the carcass of an immortal palace-tier marine creature." Ling Han was speechless. This proud tower would not feel comfortable if it went one day without insulting him. Come and give me a hand. Small tower might be proud, but all its actions were for Ling Han's own good. Thus, though it would keep saying mocking words, it still began to draw on the power of the Black Tower, helping Ling Han to dissect this giant fish. Even so, it had still taken them 3 days to fully dissect the fish's head. As expected, purple grade Yang Soul Stone. Ling Han laughed loudly. This time he was finally satisfied. He exited the Black Tower and saw that the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ro, and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were still searching. Meanwhile, Hunyo was seated on a gigantic crab. As she swung her long legs back and forth, she was chewing on a chicken leg, incredibly carefree and at ease. This was not the little girl slacking off, but rather that she had found the carcass of an immortal palace-tier marine creature. You are really lucky. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Of course, Nyo is too awesome. Hunyo did not have the slightest idea of modesty. Ling Han released his divine sense, and just like how had done before, he stowed the colossal crab into the Black Tower as well. Then, its dissection was only successfully completed after 7 days. Could not be helped. The defense of the giant crab was stronger, and the Black Tower could not show its full might, either, so they could only progress bit by bit. When they exited the Black Tower, the Empress had also gained something. Naturally, it was also the carcass of an immortal palace-tier marine creature. This almost killed Bewitching Maiden Ro with anxiety. Ling Han and the others had all obtained a perfect Yang Soul Stone, and only she was left still searching. She hurriedly spoke sweet words to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden so the latter would help her look. In any case, the other woman had not even broken through to the Severing Mundane tier, so even if she had a Yang Soul Stone, it was no use. This stuff could not be brought out and could only be used here. When Ling Han prized out a Yang Soul Stone for the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ro finally managed to find a great gain. It could only be said that this place was practically a treasury of Yang Soul Stones. This time, all 4 Severing Mundane tiers had obtained a purple grade Yang Soul Stone. Let's break through to the Dividing Soul tier. The 4 of them separated a bit, while a Yang Soul Stone that was not much smaller than a house was placed in front of each of them. After entering into the Yang Soul Ocean, the majority of their time was actually spent on searching for Yang Soul Stones, and breaking through to the Dividing Soul tier would only take about a month's time. The prerequisite was that you had already touched the threshold before entering into the Dividing Soul tier. You could only begin to split out your soul in this place. Ling Han and the others were already peak stage Severing Mundane tiers a few hundred years ago, and had touched the threshold of the Dividing Soul tier. What they lacked was only a Yang Soul Stone to complete that final step. They each vibrated their spirits to split out a portion and insert it into the Yang Soul Stone, becoming their own divided soul, which was equivalent to having an additional manifestation of themselves. Don't use your own spirit, Small Tower suddenly spoke up. Split out one of the 3 source powers inside your body. Small Tower did not explain anything, and continued to guide Ling Han on what he should do. Why? Yet Ling Han was the type to get to the bottom of any matter. Small Tower sighed. Source powers themselves have consciousness. After you split them out, the independent nature and growth of the divided soul would be improved. Moreover, if you split out your own spirit, that would be a kind of damage to the original. Though after attaining Immortal Palace tier, all the divided souls would return. Damaged ultimately still means that it has been damaged and there would be flaws. Using a source power as replacement is the truly perfect way to break through to the Dividing Soul tier. This damn Small Tower was always willing to say the most crucial things at the final moment. Ling Han did not tell the Empress and the others, because none of them had any source powers. Even if he did tell them what could be done, it would only leave them with regrets for nothing. It was already quite good. Breaking through with a purple grade Yang Soul Stone was not too far off from perfection. Moreover, just how many Severing Mundane tiers in the world would be able to obtain source powers? Given what you said, the next 3 times I divide my spirit, I would also have to split out these source powers? Ling Han asked. Then, what about the regulations that I have to comprehend? Stupid. Small Tower scoffed. What does Dividing Soul tier mean? The divided soul is a portion of you that has been split out. No matter how far the distance is between you, you would be able to sense it, so how could you possibly be unable to comprehend the regulations of heaven and earth? Furthermore, if you split your soul using the source powers, the limit is not 4 times, but rather 9. 9 was the largest number in the world. Ling Han's lips involuntarily twitched, and he said, I only have 3 source powers. If I can't find more of them, wouldn't I then be trapped at Earth's soul tier? Thus, you have to hurry and find more source powers. Small Tower declared very irresponsibly. Ling Han was speechless. Source powers were not cabbages. Just because you wanted them, you could get them? Moreover, though there were many types of source powers, the 5 elements, lightning, time, space, slaughter, poison, and so on, every type could split out 9 source powers, and upon first glance, there really seemed to be a considerable number of them. However, just how big was the celestial realm? And how many celestial kings were there? To gather 9 source powers, and all of them had to be for different regulations at that. The difficulty level of this was actually even higher than breaking through to the celestial king tier. Ling Han had already gotten 3 source powers? That was all thanks to luck. But he couldn't depend on luck every time, right? Perhaps I can also live on good luck, Ling Han mumbled. A severing mundane tier only needed to reach 5th severance to be perfect, but dividing 9 souls actually required 9 times. If I really could split my soul 9 times, just how strong would I be? Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. If you want to become a heavenly venerate, you would have to cultivate every single cultivation level to perfection. Small Tower did not answer his question, but encouraged Ling Han from a different angle. Heavenly venerate. Ling Han tightened his fist. Small Tower really had gotten hold of his weakness. As long as there was a more perfect path to take, he would choose this path without any hesitation, and would not care at all just how difficult it would be to tread on this path. He began to stimulate the 3 source powers. Instantly, whether it was the 9 heavens flame, the Xianxia source water, or the fiery flame lightning strike wood, they all became restless. They had chosen Ling Han as their master, but their personality had not been completely erased. They had an instinctive urge to pursue independence. Ling Han thought for a while and decided to split out the 9 heavens flame first. This was the first source power that he had obtained, and reasonably it should be the first. Moreover, he did not have enough source powers now. When he broke through to Yin Soul and Earth Soul next, he would split out the Xianxia source water and fiery flame lightning strike wood. There wouldn't be too much of a gap in time. He carefully extracted the 9 heavens flame from his dantian. It had already become one with him. No matter how he split it out, it would still have an unbreakable relation with him. A day later, the 9 heavens flame was fully split out and hopped around in the palm of his right hand. Ling Han smiled faintly and pressed his right hand on the Yang Soul stone in front of him. Immediately, the 9 heavens flame slipped in with a crackle. Boom! The Yang Soul stone vibrated lightly, and then the tremors became stronger, but peace returned very soon. From the outside, the Yang Soul stone had become transparent. One could clearly see a flame burning in its exact center, as if it had become an infant that was curled up. Vaguely, there would be slight tremors, just like fetal movement. Ling Han sat down by the side and sensed the changes of the divided soul. In the next month, it would be the process of the divided soul transforming into human, and the changes of the divided soul would also affect him, thus breaking the limits of the severing mundane tier and advancing into a new cultivation level. Time flew past, and the 9 heavens flame fetus was continuously nurtured. Gradually, it had assumed the appearance of an infant, and Ling Han had also begun undergoing a great transformation. The divided soul was actually the true self. Thus, when the divided soul underwent a massive change, the original would also change drastically. Dividing soul tier breakthrough. Boom! Ling Han's black locks flew upwards, his whole body covered with seals of great Tao. The black tower was also lightly trembling, as if some kind of change had taken place. Only after a whole 9 days did Ling Han's hair fall back down. The seals on his body had also dimmed, but another day later, his hair rose skywards again, and all the seals on his body lit up once more. Another 9 days later, peace returned once more to him, but after just another day, change took place again. It had been a month. The Yang Soul Stone had undergone a massive change. Through the transparent stone, a human figure could be clearly seen inside. He looked exactly like Ling Han, but multiple seals of fire had formed on his body. This was the benefit of using a source power as your divided soul. Could fully display its might. Kakaka! multiple cracks appeared on the surface of the Yang Soul Stone, as close as a spider's web. Then, a bang was heard as the Yang Soul Stone suddenly cracked apart, and a figure leaped out. Ling Han's divided soul, or rather his Yang Soul, the Nine Heavens Flame divided soul. On the other side, the Empress, Hunyo, and bewitching Maiden Ro had also completed the last of their transformation. This process of breaking through to the dividing soul tier was the process of nurturing the divided soul. It was always a month's time. It would either succeed or fail. There was no such thing as you taking 1 month, and me having to spend 2 months. Long tribulation clouds suddenly gathered above their heads. The heavenly tribulation was coming. Even in a natural mystery realm, on this kind of deep ocean bed, the heavenly tribulation would come when it willed, without the slightest bit of reservation. Ling Han released a battle cry and went forth to greet the heavenly tribulation. Quang, the heaven and earth raged, and lightning crashed. But Ling Han had already been able to suppress Yin Soul and match Earth Soul long ago, when he had just been at the 5th severance. Now that he had broken through, how far would his battle prowess go then? A true monarch tier could be invincible even with a gap of 2 levels. In other words, he would be able to easily suppress even Earth Souls, and would be able to match the early stage of Heaven Soul. With this kind of strength, what was a heavenly tribulation worth? Ling Han used the heavenly tribulation to temper his own self, but as his cultivation level progressed, the improvement to his physique had also become slower and slower, more and more difficult. Looks like I have to go and piggyback off of other people's heavenly tribulation, he thought. By now, half a day of tempering from the heavenly tribulation was not enough at all for him, and could not completely temper his physique. He finished enduring the heavenly tribulation, and the Empress and the others had also completed the last step of their breakthrough. They each set out to the center of the canyon. Ha ha ha! This time, who can come and steal Nyo's food? Hunyo laughed loudly. Now, she was not just one person but rather 2. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. The little girl indeed did justice to her name as a glutton. Others would think how much their battle prowess would increase with another doppelganger, but all her concentration was on food. The Empress did not speak. Instead, her figure trembled, and 9 doppelgangers were split out. Then, the Yang Soul also trembled, and 9 doppelgangers were split out once more. Hunyo was dumbfounded. Originally, 1 fighting against 10 was already a great disadvantage, and now she only had 1 additional helper, while the other had another 10. Then wouldn't it be a greater disadvantage? Wayaya, this is bullying Nyo too far. Ling Han roared with laughter and said, Come, let's get some more Yang Soul stones and go and sell them. Who knows how big the gap is between myself and Ji Wuming? Ling Han said. He did not believe that Ji Wuming too would be able to obtain natural purple-grade Yang Soul stones, and even if the other party had used a fused purple Yang Soul stone to break through, the gap in strength between him and Ling Han would still shrink. But would Ling Han be able to catch up? Ling Han did not know either. The reincarnated 9th Heaven Celestial King was really too awesome, and who knew what kind of terrifying celestial techniques Ji Wuming possessed. Then, just battle. Ling Han's eyes shone blazingly, his fighting spirit soaring. They searched around in the canyon for a few more months, but did not find more purple-grade Yang Soul stones, though they did find a considerable number of indigo ones. Let's go and make a sale. The 4 women returned once more into the Black Tower, and Ling Han broke through the invisible wall with the divine demon's sword. Exiting through the waters, he floated towards the surface of the ocean. After breaking through to the dividing soul tier, his physique had again improved further, and with the improvement in his own strength, even the water pressure at the ocean bed could not pose much of a threat to him. Furthermore, because he had broken through in this ocean, the heaven and earth would not deliberately target him. Otherwise, a dividing soul tier would definitely die if they dared to enter into this space. Ling Han released the 9 Heavens Flame divided soul. The 2 exchanged a smile, and the 9 Heavens Flame divided soul quickly left. Naturally, it was to go and sell Yang Soul stones. Ling Han released the Empress, Hunyo, and bewitching Maiden Ro from the Black Tower. Actually, only bewitching Maiden Ro was slightly inferior. The Empress and Hunyo were already capable of bearing the water pressure at the ocean bed. As they traveled, they continued to kill marine creatures on the way. In any case, after the Yangtze Ocean closed, all the living creatures here would die, so it would be better for them to contribute something for them instead. Someone's ahead. Ling Han's eyes were sharp, and he discovered that there was presently a person battling fiercely with a marine creature. The four of them swam forwards. Shirdu was a king tier, and he was an unmatched prodigy in his own territory, but after coming into the Yangtze Ocean, he discovered that king tiers were everywhere, and there was no small number of emperor tiers. Monarch tiers were noble and highly placed, and could only be looked up to. He withdrew all the arrogance that he had once had, and obediently began battling in this ocean, hunting marine creatures and fusing Yang Soul stones. His target was very simple, and that was a blue-grade Yang Soul stone. At first, this could not possibly be realized, but who asked the Yang Soul Ocean to be open for such an extraordinarily long period of time this time? He had close to 800 years to hunt. Then, he could fuse all the Yang Soul stones he had obtained, and the possibility of him gaining a blue-grade Yang Soul stone would not be too low by then. However, the bullfight fish that he had encountered this time was really hard to kill. Its strength was in no way inferior to his. If it were not for the fact that it was a little weak in the IQ department, he actually would not want to drag out the battle. It was too dangerous, and there would be a possibility of him sustaining serious injury, or even dying. Boom! The bullfight fish rushed forwards, and crashed towards him with a frightening might. Brilliant seals shone upon its two sharp horns, causing the might of this charge to become incredibly terrifying. Shirdu hurriedly boosted all his concentration. The might of this charge was extremely strong, and he definitely could not underestimate it. He shot out a punch towards that bullfight fish. Suddenly, he stilled because at the very instant the bullfight fish was about to crash into him, it suddenly did not move. Pung, pung, pung. Ice fists pummeled the bullfight fish's body like a furious shower, smashing the head of the bullfight fish into mush. What was going on? Why was this bullfight fish not resisting? Was it deliberately seeking death? Just when he was confused, he saw that this bullfight fish actually moved. Fuck! It's come back to life. Shirdu was surprised, and then his eyes bulged. This bullfight fish was not moving on its own volition, but had rather been raised by someone. That was a young man, and he directed a smile at Shirdu. Brother, you want any Yang Soul stones? Shirdu would never forget this scene in his life. When he thought about this again afterwards, he felt that there was no difference between him and an idiot at that time, as he could only stare blankly at the man in front of him, having completely no idea what he should say. Oh, you don't? Then I'll ask someone else. Ling Han casually tossed the bullfight fish to one side. This was only a peak stage 4th Severance marine creature. He could not even be bothered about the Yang Soul stone that it had nurtured. Even if he used it as fusion material, it would completely be a waste of time. Wait! Shirdu did not know why he had spoken up. With a sliver of hope, he asked, "Are you selling Yang Soul stones? What grade is it?" Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "That would depend on what price you can offer." With a wave of his right hand, a pile of Yang Soul stones suddenly appeared in front of him. There were all kinds of grades, from green all the way to indigo. Shirdu immediately stared dumbly at this sight. Blue-grade Yang Soul stone was his ultimate target, but the other party had actually taken out indigo-grade Yang Soul stones, causing his heart to throb wildly. His first reaction was to snatch it for himself, yet his heart suddenly clenched. Even gathering yellow-grade Yang Soul stones was very difficult for him, but the other man could actually hunt indigo-grade marine creatures, so what kind of strength did he have? Snatching was completely a suicidal action. He swallowed, suppressed his greed, and said, "I would like to buy this indigo one. How many star stones is it?" "Not much. 10 million is enough," Ling Han said smilingly. "Additionally, if you don't have enough star stones, you may use godly metal or pseudo-divine metal to make up for the difference. As long as I'm satisfied, this Yang Soul stone will belong to you." I'll look," Shirdu hurriedly exclaimed. 10 million star stones naturally was an astronomical sum, but as long as he was alive, he would always be able to earn it back. But if he were to miss out on an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, then there would definitely be no next time. He was presently a king tier. If he could break through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, this could not allow him to advance to become an emperor tier, yet it would be enough to increase his ranking among king tiers greatly. Searching all over, Shurdu could only gather more than 6 million star stones, and added with godly metal, pseudo-divine metal, some alchemical pills, pseudo-celestial medicines that was only worth around 8 million. He looked miserably at Ling Han. His eyes filled with stars, just looking at him anxiously. Ling Han sighed and said, "Fine, I'll sell it to you cheap." "Thank you, thank you." Shurdu hurriedly expressed his thanks, feeling that Ling Han was the kindest man in this world. Ling Han was unconcerned. In any case, he could not bring the Yang Soul Stones out of this place, and it would be a waste for him to keep them too. As long as he could sell them, it was good news. He stowed away all of Shurdu's wealth, and then stood up and left with the 3 women. A few days later, they encountered people again. This time, it was not just one, but a small team formed of 7 people, and they were currently besieging a marine creature that had reached the 4th Severance's peak stage. Ling Han broke into a smile. Now he could sell some more. Xiao, with a single step, he had crossed the distance, and directly killed that marine creature. Then he asked, "Everyone, do you want Yang Soul Stones?" Instantly, everyone was dumbfounded, and could only stare stupidly at this person in front of them. It was as if they had encountered the most inconceivable thing that could happen in this world. "Yes!" someone exclaimed. Ling Han nodded, and smilingly said, "Clever choice. Hey, you don't even know who he is, so how could you dare to just reply to him?" A companion rebuked softly. "Are you stupid? That is Ling Han. The Ling Han that has once fought Yi to a tie. What, he is Ling Han?" With these words, all 7 of them looked at Ling Han with gazes of admiration like they were admiring an ultimate god. Ling Han was not concerned with that. With a wave of his right hand, he spread out a great amount of Yang Soul Stones and said, "Everyone, please choose as you will. I guarantee that every Yang Soul Stone is true and genuine, cheating neither old nor young." Instantly, the group of 7 all stared fixedly, no longer capable of removing their eyes from those Yang Soul Stones. Ling Han had really not expected it. These 7 people did not have much strength, but they were actually all rich people. Each of them purchased an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, and threw out 10 million star stones without the slightest heartache, which filled Ling Han with self-doubt. Was he really an alchemist? He seemed to be very poor. He and the 3 women continued their advance. Very quickly, a legend spread around in this ocean. When you were completely off guard, a person would appear quietly and ask if you wanted to buy anything. No Yang Soul Stones. After touring around the Yang Soul Ocean for over 100 years, Ling Han had sold off all the Yang Soul Stones, and after so many years, he had completely stabilized his cultivation level, and his battle prowess had become increasingly frightening. It is time to return. Ling Han and his group floated to the ocean surface and searched for the way to return. At this time, they could see a considerable number of people had also emerged from the water as they, too, searched for the way to return. Breaking through to the dividing soul tier would only need a month's time. Thus, the majority of people would only attempt to break through to the dividing soul tier at the last moments. The time before that would all be spent on gathering Yang Soul Stones to obtain the highest grade of Yang Soul Stone possible. Now that it was close to the time for their return, it was natural that most people would commence their return. Those remaining would be close too, probably within the next month or 2. Ling Han! A furious roar was heard, world shaking in its volume. Ling Han stopped and turned around to see that Ma Tongguang was presently approaching rapidly. Behind him was Lu Xianming, who had fallen behind by several hundred meters. The 2 of them had both broken through to the dividing soul tier. At first, Lu Xianming was completely unable to compare to Ma Tongguang, but once they had broken through to the dividing soul tier, even the gap between monarch tier and king tier would shrink considerably. At least, Lu Xianming would no longer be left so far behind by Ma Tongguang that he could not even catch a glimpse of the latter. "Oh, it's you 2, trash," Ling Han said carelessly. "Tea trash?" Immediately, Ma Tongguang's fury spiked madly. He had broken through to the dividing soul tier, and had broken through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone at that. This was very extraordinary. Thus, he had developed a high opinion of himself, and thought that there would be few that could compare to him. Ling Han? Yes, when he had been in the fifth severance, the other was indeed stronger than he was, but Ma Tongguang had broken through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, which had definitely left the former behind in his dust. By this time, he no longer had the interest to feign civility with Ling Han. He had directly turned hostile. "You arrogant lowlife, die!" Ma Tongguang's figure charged out, his right hand spread open. Show, countless chains of regulations instantly shot out towards Ling Han. Behind him, Lu Xianming showed an evil smile. He had personally witnessed Ma Tongguang breaking through, and was deeply aware of just how strong the latter was, and he could only admire and worship him. And now Ma Tongguang was moving in fury, so he would definitely be able to kill Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. When Ma Tongguang was in the fifth severance, he was already inferior to Ling Han, and now that the latter had broken through to the dividing soul tier with a perfect purple-grade Yang Soul Stone, not only had the gap between Ma Tongguang and himself not shrunk down, it had instead become even wider. He smiled faintly and swiped out casually. Pa! Ma Tongguang immediately sustained a slap. The celestial chains of regulations that filled the skies were also all shattered by this strike, and turned into bits of power of regulation before returning to the heaven and earth. What? Ma Tongguang was dazed, his whole mind filled with disbelief. He actually was still not on par with Ling Han? How could this be? He had broken through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone. For this, he had even used a rare treasure that could cause serious injury to Earth's soul-level marine creature. He had almost expended this rare treasure fully to finally gather 200 blue-grade Yang Soul Stones, which he then fused and refined into a single indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone. Could it be that Ling Han, too, possessed this kind of rare treasure? Hey, Brother Lu, you have also broken through to the dividing soul tier? Of course. Oh, right, what Yang Soul Stone did you use to break through? I fear I will scare you if I tell you, indigo grade. What, you also had an indigo grade? Yours is indigo grade too? In the distance, a conversation between two people was heard, causing Ma Tongguang to turn around numbly. When he saw these two people, his mouth involuntarily gaped. That was because these two could just barely be considered as king tiers. He had seen them before, and with his memory, he naturally would not forget whatever he had seen. They were only king tiers, yet had actually broken through with indigo-grade Yang Soul Stones? Then what was he so proud about? Ah, young Master Ling! Those two people spotted Ling Han as well, and hurriedly ran over, thanking him profusely. Young Master Ling, really, thank you very much. If you had not sold indigo-grade Yang Soul Stones to us, we would only have been able to break through with green-grade Yang Soul Stones at most. I will definitely remember this kindness forever. In the future, as long as you have any command, I will definitely not refuse. After the two of them thanked him profusely, they left. Ma Tongguang's lips twitched madly. What? The indigo-grade Yang Soul Stones these two had were actually bought from Ling Han? Then, Ling Han had to have broken through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone. Otherwise, how could he possibly have extra Yang Soul Stones to sell? To say he had used a green-grade or blue-grade Yang Soul Stone to break through, yet had left better-grade Yang Soul Stones to sell to others, wouldn't that be an idiot? Grandmaster Ling! Another person rushed over and bowed to Ling Han. Thank you for Grandmaster Ling's profound favor, allowing me to break through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone. In quick succession, there came another and another and another. Ma Tongguang was already completely numb. In his eyes, obtaining an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone was as difficult as ascending to the heavens, and even a monarch tier as strong as he still had to use a rare treasure from the Western Celestial Realm to be able to obtain it. What right did these pieces of trash here have to do the same? Lu Xianming was also gaping in shock. He had benefited considerably with his association with Ma Tongguang. When the latter hunted and obtained green-grade Yang Soul Stones, he did not even bother to collect them, and thus they had fallen into his pocket. Thus, he had fused 200 green-grade Yang Soul Stones into a blue-grade one, and thus broken through to the dividing soul tier. Lu Xianming had thought that he had gotten a powerful backer. But now, He quietly pulled one of them aside and asked, and almost passed out when he got his answers. The price was only a mere 10 million star stones. Lu Xianming was a 2-star alchemist, and also used to be a holy son of Alchemy City. His wealth was definitely several hundred million, so taking out 10 million was only a piece of cake for him, but now, because he had followed the wrong person, he would feel eternal regret. He was filled with hate and fury. Why did Ling Han have to oppose him? It's already enough that you had obtained so many indigo-grade Yang Soul Stones, but why did you have to take them out? Everyone has broken through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, so what feeling of superiority would you have left? Lu Xianming could not comprehend. How could there be such a person? Ling Han was practically a weirdo. What he did not know, though, was that Ling Han had actually broken through with a purple-grade Yang Soul Stone. However, even if Ling Han had broken through with an indigo-grade Yang Soul Stone, he would not have been concerned either. That was because he was filled with confidence in himself. If the two of them were in the same situation, he would definitely be stronger. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You two clowns have been jumping around for so long, so it is about time I send you on your way to the afterlife, without waiting for Ma Tongguang to speak again." His figure had already charged out like a dragon bursting out of the ocean vehemently into the skies. "Don't even think about it." Ma Tongguang gritted his teeth and drew out a furled scroll. He suddenly unfurled it, and most of it was blank. Only the last section had a few seals. It was not discernible what exactly was written, but possessed an overbearing air that could suppress the dome of heaven. This was a treasure that had been bestowed by a celestial king. However, the celestial king tier was too strong, and a scroll of this quality was definitely incapable of bearing the power of a celestial king. Thus, the might had declined considerably. Even so, this could still easily erase the life of an Earth Soul elite. "Die!" Ma Tongguang shook the scroll strongly, and the remaining 7 seals suddenly lit up at the same time. Wang, wang, wang. One after another, the seals on the scroll lit up, incredibly bright and ablaze. After reaching the pinnacle, these seals actually flew out of the scroll and turned into multiple human figures. They were all as tall as 9 meters, their bodies exuding a fiery white light. 7 seals turned into 7 warriors, each and every one of them majestic and awe-inspiring. Initially, Ma Tongguang would only use a single seal every time, but now he was already deeply aware of how strong Ling Han was. Thus, he had directly activated all 7 of the Celestial King seals. The motive was very simple, and that was to kill Ling Han. He definitely did not want any unexpected accidents to happen. And, quite interesting, Ling Han stepped out. With a tremor from his figure, a human figure walked out from his body. It was the 9 heavens flame divided soul. "Kill him," Ma Tongguang pointed at Ling Han. He had initially wanted to get Ling Han killed only after Ling Han went to the Western Celestial Realm, but now his fury was raging, and he had no further desire to wait any longer. "Die! Die! Die!" 7 light warriors surrounded Ling Han. They were all human figures, but their faces were completely indiscernible. Their facial features were all blurred. Boom! The light warriors moved at the same time, charging towards Ling Han. The 2 Ling Hans greeted the assault simultaneously. Pong, 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 the battle suddenly became incredibly intense. Just what difference would arise from using different grades of Yang Soul Stones to break through? If it was purple grade, the divided soul would be able to reach the absolute perfect level of battle prowess of the original, and for indigo grade it would be 90% and so on. Finally, when a dividing soul tier broke through to the Immortal Palace tier, they would return to the original. Thus, the stronger the divided souls were, the stronger battle prowess would naturally be upon breaking through to the Immortal Palace tier. In another aspect, the higher the grade of Yang Soul Stone, the stronger one's strength would be at Yang Soul level. This was like 2 rivers that were of the same length, but one was wide, while the other was narrow. In that case, which one had more water? The 2 Ling Hans had equal battle prowess, and were mentally connected. If it were not for the fact that one of them contained the Black Tower inside his body, there was practically no difference between the original and the divided soul. Pong, the 2 Ling Hans battled the 7 light figures, the scene incredibly intense. Who has the upper hand? Someone asked from afar. Not clear. The person beside him shook his head. It indeed could not be seen clearly. Both Ling Han and the Light Warrior's strength soared to early-stage Heaven Souls level, far surpassing ordinary dividing soul tiers, so who could discern it clearly? Yet the Empress and Hu Niu showed a smile. They naturally could see clearly that Ling Han and the Light Warriors were actually tied. However, Ling Han was a real cultivator and had endless strength, while the Light Warriors were manifested from Celestial King tier seals. So how long could they last? Ling Han would definitely win this battle. Ultimately, Ma Tongguang was a monarch tier. He, too, could tell that the Light Warriors could not suppress Ling Han, and this stunned him incredibly. That was a Celestial King tier technique, and could easily suppress Earth Soul level elites, while Ling Han had only just advanced into the Dividing Soul tier. Even if he was a monarch tier, and could be invincible even with a gap of 2 levels, Ling Han should still be losing no matter what in a clash of 7 against 2. Ma Tongguang was very clear. This Celestial King tier technique could only last for about 2 hours. If Ling Han still could not be killed within 2 hours, there would be no further opportunity. Gritting his teeth, Ma Tongguang also sent out his own doppelganger, which charged to attack Ling Han. Even if he was no match for Ling Han, he was also a noble Ma Tongguang, so how could his strength be underestimated? Boom! The 9 heavens flame divided soul's whole body began to burn with blazing flames. After it had gained its independence, the 9 heavens flame was also able to completely release its own might. This was the difference between him and the original Ling Han, and could be considered as the great ultimate move of a divided soul. Fiery flames burned the heaven and earth, and the 9 heavens flame divided soul greatly displayed his might, blocking all 7 light warriors single-handedly. Ling Han took the opportunity to charge towards Ma Tongguang. There was no meaning to continue the battle with the 7 light warriors. Killing Ma Tongguang was the real priority. Pang 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 pang. Without the light warriors restraining him, how could Ma Tongguang possibly be a match for Ling Han? He was completely at a disadvantage, and blood sprayed endlessly from his body. He would probably be killed within the next 100 moves. Protect me! Ma Tongguang's heart shivered in fear, and he no longer dared to clash directly with Ling Han. They were both monarch tiers, but the gulf between the two of them was actually so wide. The 7 light warriors immediately charged towards Ling Han to clear a route through which Ma Tongguang could flee. Indeed, with the mad siege of the 7 great light warriors, Ling Han was trapped, and could not launch an attack at Ma Tongguang. This caused a flash of pleasure to show on Ma Tongguang's face, and he hurriedly turned and fled. As he was fleeing, a strong feeling of humiliation rose up in him. He was a noble monarch tier and had even used a Celestial King tier rare treasure, and yet he could only flee piteously. This was a great humiliation that he had never experienced before. When he returned to the Western Celestial Realm, he would definitely murder Ling Han in revenge for this. Ling Han only smiled slightly. He had indeed been restrained, but Ma Tongguang had also forgotten one thing, and that was he was no longer a 5th severance, but rather a dividing soul tier elite. This meant that he still had a divided soul. The 9 heavens flame divided soul charged out. The 7 light warriors were all focused on blocking Ling Han, so they naturally could not stop the 9 heavens flame divided soul as well. This Ling Han charged out without any obstruction, and shot out a punch at Ma Tongguang's back. No! Ma Tongguang exclaimed, and hurriedly turned around to parry. However, because he was fully concentrated on fleeing, how could he possibly manage to turn around in time? Pung! The punch landed, and flames filled the skies. One of the 9 heavens flame divided soul's fists had already penetrated through Ma Tongguang's chest. Ma Tongguang's eyes were blank. He lowered his head slightly to look at his chest, and a disbelieving expression appeared on his face. He opened his mouth to say something, but with a tilt of his head, he was already completely dead. Just how frightening was the destructive power of the 9 heavens flame. His heart had been directly exploded, so how could he possibly still be alive? Lu Xianming couldn't help but shudder in fear. Ma Tongguang was a representative of the Western Celestial Realm, and Ling Han had still killed him without any mercy. In comparison, what was Lu Xianming even worth? The latter was just a two-star alchemist and a former holy son, so how could he compare to Ma Tongguang? Just at this moment, the 7 light warriors flashed, and suddenly disappeared. Time was up. Ling Han strode towards Lu Xianming, his eyes cold. Lu Xianming, as you have had some accomplishments in alchemy, I ignored some of your little actions. But you have repeatedly provoked me, and that was only seeking your own death. No, you cannot kill me. I, too, am a citizen of Alchemy City. Lu Xianming shouted. This is cleaning the house. Ling Han shot out a punch. Bang! Lu Xianming directly burst, and turned into a shower of blood. Ling Han clapped his hands, looking relaxed. Let's go. Let's go. This place isn't fun at all, Hunyo urged. Ling Han nodded, and the 4 of them continued their advance. Having killed an envoy from the Western Celestial Realm, can you deal with it? The Empress asked. I'll deal with whatever comes. Who asked that guy to repeatedly want to make a move on me, and even dare to have ideas about you girls? Ling Han said with extreme displeasure. The Empress nodded, and did not say anything further. She was an incredibly proud person, and thought that everyone in the world should worship her. If Ling Han killed an insignificant person, so what? Nyo will protect Ling Han. Hunyo clung onto one of Ling Han's arms. So lovey-dovey. A laugh rang out behind Ling Han and his group. Instantly, Ling Han's fighting spirit blazed. Slowly, he turned around and spat out word by word, Ji Wuming. Ji Wuming was still dressed completely in white, elegant and untouched by mortal affairs. This time, none of you will be able to escape. A vicious light shone from Ji Wuming's eyes. He desperately longed for all their bloodlines, and yearned even more to obtain Ling Han's treasure. For a 9th heaven celestial king to have thought about something for so long without completing it was an inconceivable matter. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Then let's have a battle. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared sky-high. Ji Wuming was the first opponent of the same cultivation level that Ling Han had faced multiple times without being able to win. This caused a sense of obstinacy in him, wanting to surpass. Ling Han took the initiative to charge out. Endless regulations rippled out, and he sent out a palm strike, shaking the 9 heavens. Ignorant! Ji Wuming scoffed, and flicked out a finger. The sharpness and violence of regulation of slaughter exploded, and there was a streak of regulation of metal embedded within as well, as if nothing could not be sliced, nothing could not be shattered, and nothing could not be destroyed. Pong! The 2 of them exchanged strikes once. Suddenly, shockingly massive waves were brought forth on the great ocean, and regulations of the great Tao were rolling in them. If smacked by the waves, it was probable that ordinary 4th severances would be directly knocked unconscious. The splashes descended, and Ling Han and Ji Wuming faced each other 300 meters apart, making no further moves. A wave of peril surged up in Ji Wuming's heart. Though it was still he who had the upper hand in that clash previously, the advantage was no longer so obvious. How is this possible? It should be known that he had broken through to the dividing soul tier with a purple grade Yang soul stone. Though it was a fused one and not a natural one, aside from reincarnated celestial kings like himself, who else could gain enough indigo grade Yang soul stones to fuse into a purple grade one? But the gap between him and Ling Han had only shrunk down a little, and there was only one possibility for that. The latter had used a natural purple grade Yang soul stone to break through to the dividing soul tier. Gasp! For the first time, Ji Wuming looked serious. He looked at Ling Han for a while, and then suddenly broke into a smile and said, I understand. It is because of that treasure. Not bad to actually allow trash to surpass me in a certain aspect. As expected of a precious treasure. He was very rueful. He was a noble 9th heaven celestial king who had experienced who knew how many epochs, and above him were only heavenly venerates that could be counted on one hand. He had reincarnated and begun cultivation from the very beginning again. Then, he should attain perfection the whole way through, and no one would be able to surpass him. Yet Ling Han had managed to do so. A heavenly venerable tier precious treasure. It was indeed a heavenly venerable tier precious treasure. I'll take it. Ji Wuming shouted lightly, and launched a fierce offensive. Just because you said you'll take it, you will? Who do you think you are? Ling Han asked coldly. His hands balled into fists, and proceeded to counter without the slightest show of weakness. In battle prowess, there was indeed still some gap between himself and Ji Wuming, but in terms of physique, Ling Han was much too superior, and he was completely capable of matching the latter. Wang, Ji Wuming decisively released his divided soul, and Ling Han also summoned the 9 heavens flame divided soul. The two great monarch tiers' 4 figures clashed, and like lightning traveling back and forth, they used all that they could. Ha! Ji Wuming was once again surprised. A piece of trash like you is actually aware that you should split out a source power as your divided soul? Apologies, I shocked you. Ling Han swiped out a finger, and the heaven-destroying 9 swords was used, each strike fiercer than the last. Wicked mouth, Ji Wuming stated calmly. Even if Ling Han's strength had caught up with his rapidly, Ji Wuming was still the one who had the initiative. Boom! 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 The two of them clashed fiercely. Though Ling Han still had a slight disadvantage, it was no longer very obvious. Added with his physique that was not just a bit stronger, it was enough for him to make up for the shortcoming in his battle prowess, and truly possess the ability to pose a threat to Ji Wuming. Ji Wuming's expression was slightly solemn. In his last life, he had experienced who knew how many battles. In fact, he had even slaughtered 9th heaven celestial kings before, and there was nothing else in this world that could move him. He only felt that this was slightly intractable. If he could not kill Ling Han, how was he supposed to snatch the treasure the latter possessed? Ling Han, too, began to gradually understand. He finally knew just why Ji Wuming was so strong. Firstly, the latter was more detailed in his use of regulations. Ling Han had been able to distinguish this fact since long ago, but if he himself were to reach this kind of height, he could only depend on a slow buildup of experience over time. Secondly, Ji Wuming had grasped more regulations, and could agilely use them in unison. Thus, the battle prowess that he could show was stronger. Since he had been a 9th heaven celestial king, then naturally he had grasped a great Tao to its pinnacle to have been able to attain this kind of height. But celestial kings truly had an unlimited lifespan, and when they had reached the 9th heaven, where there was no further space to advance, what were they to do? Naturally to go and cultivate other regulations. Over an endless stretch of time, even an idiot would be able to grasp some. What more when such naturally gifted extraordinary prodigies the likes of a 9th heaven celestial king? Perhaps Ji Wuming had grasped all the regulations there were. Even if not all of them had reached the level of 9th heaven, it should not be difficult for them to reach the level of celestial king tier. What did that mean? The other party's body possessed all the source powers of heaven and earth. Hence, Ji Wuming was incredibly powerful in this lifetime. Celestials clashed in terms of regulations. If both sides had the same cultivation level, and the other party had grasp of more regulations, the latter naturally was stronger. This was a matter of course. Ling Han suddenly had an enlightenment. To truly surpass Ji Wuming, he had to exert more effort in terms of regulations, and grasp even more regulations of the Great Tao. Only then would he be able to match and surpass the other man. It was at this instant that Ling Han had complete confidence that Ji Wuming was not someone that could not be surpassed. There absolutely was a possibility. He laughed, his fighting spirit blazed. 6 arms spread out, sword, fist, palm strike used all at the same time. Their might astonishing. Mere party tricks. Ji Wuming smirked coldly, and similarly used various celestial techniques, battling with Ling Han. The two super monarch tiers clashed, both completely releasing their full strength, captivating the spectators' hearts uncontrollably. How could they be so powerful? This was a question that popped up in everyone's hearts. Even those that had successfully broken through to the dividing soul tier felt an impulse to kneel down in worship. There really were prodigies that could drive others to hopeless despair in this world. Battle, battle, battle. Ling Han was slowly turning his disadvantage around. Firstly, his physique was too strong. It was fine even if he got hit a few times, but if Ji Wuming was hit, that was true damage. Once the number of times he took hits increased and the time stretched out, it would definitely affect his battle prowess. Secondly, Ling Han's use of regulations was becoming more and more proficient. For a battle prodigy like himself, the stronger the opponent he encountered, the more it could force out his potential, and the rate of his growth would be astonishingly quick. Boom! In an intense clash, Ji Wuming withdrew himself and retreated. He stared at Ling Han for a while and said, "I have to admit that the indestructible Heaven Scroll is indeed the strongest technique to temper the physique in this world." Ling Han felt his mind jolt wildly. Though he had long since guessed that Ji Wuming was perhaps aware of the origins of the Black Tower, that was only a guess, after all. Now, hearing the latter actually speak it out, his heart had still clenched. Indestructible Heaven Scroll. This was the first time he had heard an outsider say these words. Ji Wuming broke into a smile and said, "I can do nothing to your defense at present. However, I will bring a celestial tool that would be able to easily penetrate your physique. Brat, protect yourself well. Everything that you possess belongs to me." Ha 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 ha. Ji Wuming laughed madly and strode off. The final words were very ambiguous, but Ling Han did not have the slightest intention to dispute them. The next time they met, he would become even stronger, and even in terms of battle prowess, he would be able to suppress Ji Wuming. "Definitely. Ling Han, you are so awesome." Hunyo was the first to leap over and climb onto Ling Han's back, waving her tiny hands continuously. The Empress also leaned into his embrace, her expression rippling. From the moment Ji Wuming appeared, he was like a great mountain that could not be surpassed. Even super monarch tiers like them could only look up at him. But now Ling Han actually managed to stop Ji Wuming single-handedly. How could this not make them incredibly excited? "I want." The Empress leaned close to Ling Han's ear and lightly said these words. Her fragrant breath assailed Ling Han's nape, warm and hot. Ling Han instantly shivered. The Empress was like a pool of water in front of him, indescribably seductive. "Nyo wants too." Hunyo was not willing to admit defeat either, her tiny hands groping around on Ling Han's chest. Willful. With a hurried wave of his hand, Ling Han had taken all three women into the Black Tower. He had tossed Hunyo and bewitching Maiden Row to one side, and left quickly with the Empress in his arms. "Stupid Ling Han! Stupid Ling Han!" Hunyo yowled in anger. Why was this damn guy always unwilling to have babies with her? Bewitching Maiden Row's eyes were also soft and wet. She had long since been conquered by Ling Han, and the moment she thought about how Ling Han and the Empress would be physically entangled with each other, her face involuntarily flushed, and she felt her body become boiling hot, as if something was about to surge from her body. "Damn enemy!" She crossed her legs, her gaze so resentful that even a man of stone would feel his heartbeat quicken at the sight. A day later, Ling Han finally brought the three women out of the Black Tower and continued their journey. The Empress looked radiant from the love she had enjoyed, which increased her beauty even further, and Ling Han was also energetic and invigorated. In the last few hundred years, they had all been searching for Yang Soul Stones and had not thought about that matter at all. "Bad Ling Han. Nyo hates you." Hunyo was peeved. Ling Han comforted her for a while and took out some grilled meat. Amidst the fragrant aroma, Hunyo immediately drooled madly and had forgotten completely about the matter of her jealousy. Another month later, they had finally returned to the entrance and headed upwards through the passage. Water splashed in all directions. The four of them emerged from the water. The sunlight that they had missed descended on them, sunny and clear skies above them. The Yang Soul Ocean was currently undergoing a powerful change. The seven-colored rainbow had long since turned white, and these white bands of light were also shaking continuously, as if they would be shattering at any moment. Once the rainbow shattered, it meant that the Yang Soul Ocean had closed, and the next time it opened, it would be 100 million years later. Thus, those that had not come out by then would be left behind eternally in the Yang Soul Ocean. After waiting for 17 days, the white rainbow also vanished. Ling Han made a calculation. There were a total 752 people that had come, and on their return there were only 421 people. Among them, 74 had broken through to the dividing soul tier, while the remaining people had failed and could only wait for the next time. Among those that had come to Yang Soul Ocean this time, aside from those limited few that had been tortured by the Immortal's tribulation, and had to break through, or their lifespans would be severed with nothing left. All the others had enough confidence, and that was why they would come and take risks here. But among more than 700 people, only less than 100 had successfully broken through, which showed just how hard the dividing soul tier was to attain. The battleship activated, returning to Alchemy City. Hunyo came to inform Ling Han that in these 700 years, celestial kings had moved to apprehend Ling Han. That was due to the trouble that Ling Han had caused when he had killed 6 monarch tiers in the Three Blooms Valley. How could the forces behind them possibly give up the matter easily? Monarch tiers, even for celestial king tier forces, were very hard to nurture. At least, they would have to be 5th heaven celestial king tier forces and above. And now they were slaughtered, so naturally celestial kings would have to interfere. However, all of them had been chased off by Lu Herong. She had not appeared, yet had always been guarding Hunyo from the vicinity, and had helped Ling Han deal with some small problems while she was at it. Realization dawned on Ling Han. No wonder there were no celestial king tier forces that came to cause trouble for him all this while, so it was Lu Herong that had interceded. We'll go back to Alchemy City first, and then, we will go to the Western Celestial Realm. After spending more than a year's time traveling, they finally returned to Alchemy City. Upon dealing with some miscellaneous tasks, Ling Han bade farewell to Grandmaster Zicheng, brought the 4 women together with Shirlei and Shiryu, and headed to the seas of the Eastern Celestial Realm. Standing at the ship's prow, Ling Han was slightly rueful. Initially, he should have gone to the Western Celestial Realm close to 1,000 years ago, yet because 2 ascending origin tiers had battled fiercely, he was innocently dragged in, and in the end, he had gone to Alchemy City instead, where various events had occurred. And now, he was finally going to set out again to the Western Celestial Realm. Furthermore, this time there was a 4th heaven celestial king standing guard, so it should probably be assured, right? Xiao, Lu Hairong's figure flashed, and finally appeared on the battleship. After entering into the boundless seas, all of you behave yourselves, she said solemnly. Senior, you are a 4th heaven celestial king. Ling Han was surprised. Even a 4th heaven celestial king could not move unhindered in the boundless seas? Lu Herong scoffed and said, if you want to die, you can give it a try. Ugly. Don't speak like that to Nyo's Ling Han. Hunyo jumped out first. Lu Herong couldn't help but feel speechless. Hunyo was so besotted with this man, and she was completely helpless about it. There are a considerable number of primitive creatures in the boundless seas, Hunyo explained to Ling Han. When the world first began, the first batch of creatures became celestial kings, but not all creatures' intelligence developed. In the boundless seas, there are a great many powerful creatures. They are like the lowest grade of wild beasts, and the only meaning of their lives is survival. If we accidentally barge into their territory, that would be very terrible. But Nyo likes it. The little girl giggled, looking like she delighted in seeing the world in chaos. Ling Han nodded. The development of the Eastern and Western celestial realms was faster, and the majority of creatures had gained their own intelligence, but the creatures in the seas were slower and were still muddle-headed. Close to 4 months later, the battleship arrived at the end of the Eastern celestial realm, and further ahead of them was the boundless sea. After they crossed it, it would be the Western celestial realm, another world with a higher overall level of cultivation and alchemy. In that world, there were Ling Han's parents, his lovers, and his son. Ling Han couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by emotion. As long as he was not thinking about it, it was fine, but once he thought of them, he became incredibly excited. If his son walked the normal path, there should be many generations of descendants by now, wouldn't there? The moment he thought that he was going to become a grandfather, or even great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He truly had not prepared himself enough for that. Let's go! With a turn of Lu Hairong's slender hand, the battleship sped up towards the ocean. The strength of a celestial king could not be described with words. Ling Han and the women all looked from the bow of the ship, admiring the scenery they passed. There was no shift of night and day in the celestial realm. If there was any sun or moon, that ordinarily would be a sun or moon that had been refined by an ascending origin tier or even stronger grade elite using supreme techniques. And in the boundless seas, there was naturally no great elite that had that much idle time and created a sun and moon here. Thus, everything here was very primitive. However, there were still stars in the celestial realm. Countless stars were scattered across the skies. This boundless sea naturally could not be dark, but it could not be considered bright in any sense of the word. The scenery of the heaven and earth seemed like they were eternally unchanging. Stars were spread out above their heads, while the endless seas stretched out beneath them. Boom, all of a sudden, a giant hand appeared out of nowhere, striking out at the battleship. A massive hand, coming out of nowhere, was suddenly spreading out its boundless might, its viciousness soaring sky-high. Seven Clouds King! Lu Herong barked furiously, her slender hand moving to greet the incoming blow from the skies. She was a celestial king, and supreme mystical power was at her command with only a casual move. Endless celestial light of great Tao was entwined around her hand, as she sent out a palm strike towards that enormous hand. Boom! The two colossal hands crashed into each other, and cracks appeared in them at the same time. The light of great Tao swayed and trembled, which spread to the surface of the sea, giving rise to a tsunami wave that was at least 3,000 meters tall, radiating out in all directions. Despicable and shameless! Lu Herong rebuked again. Gaga! This is called complete elimination. Amidst a loud cackle, this large hand reformed once and delivered a strike. Who's scared of you? Lu Herong brandished a fist in response, not afraid in the slightest. Boom! The strength of both sides was close. After this clash, the hands that both sides had sent out shattered once more, neither able to suppress the other. But just at this moment, another massive hand appeared, delivering a strike from a slanted angle. Ink Poison King! This time, an expression of shock appeared on Lu Herong's face. They had actually mobilized two celestial kings to snipe her, or to be more precise, snipe Hunyo. When they left the rock palace, the senior elder had especially cast a secret technique to conceal them from destiny, so that the whereabouts of their whole group could not be predicted. But now the enemies were lying in ambush on the seas, clearly showing that they were informed about their whereabouts. Could it be that a traitor had appeared in the midst of the rock palace? This caused a chill to overcome her entire body. Pong! She had not finished the thought when a palm strike had struck her from behind. Though she had parried, with a conspiracy against a party that had not expected it, what more when it was a pincer attack from two celestial kings? How could she possibly manage to parry the blow completely? A loud bang rang out, and the battleship instantly crumbled. A halo of light enshrouded Ling Han and the rest. That was the protection that Lu Herong had exerted on them. With another wave of her hand, Shou, Ling Han and the others instantly disappeared without a trace. Teleported off? A voice was heard from the clouds. Old Ink, you go and pursue those people. You must kill the reincarnated body of Iyun. Got it? Another person replied, and there was no more sound to be heard. Don't even think about it. Lu Herong hurriedly went to intercept. See, Heavenly King, your opponent is me. Boom! A massive hand struck down, blocking Lu Herong's path. Lu Herong was overcome with anxiety. Though she knew that Hunyo possessed many ways of saving her life, the latter could not possibly escape from the hands of a celestial king. Now, the only hope she had left was Ling Han, who was the descendant of that lord, so perhaps maybe it was possible? Xiu, Ling Han and the others all dropped down from the skies, falling towards that boundless great sea beneath them. Ling Han hurriedly stretched out his hands and grabbed the four women. So fun, so fun. Hunyo laughed loudly, looking not the slightest bit like she had been shocked. This girl was really quite insensitive. Ling Han's brow wrinkled into a frown. This time it really was a case of bystanders suffering. While the rock palace was indeed powerful, its enemies were not weak either. To make a move brazenly in the boundless seas, and even if they did have a celestial king guarding them, so what? The other side had sent two of them. One celestial king is enough to restrain Senior Lu, and if the other celestial king catches up with us, Ling Han said with a deep hum, then we're dead. The Empress finished. No matter how confident they were in themselves, against a celestial king, there was not the slightest possibility that they could survive. All enter into the Black Tower. Ling Han stretched out his hands again, drawing everyone into the Black Tower. At this time, even a lower-level celestial king would not be able to sense them. A mustard seed dropped down from the skies, fell into the sea waters, and drifted along the flow of the water. Wang, celestial light surged, and a man appeared noiselessly. His build was not very tall, but he was just standing there in space, and he was like a great mountain that would never crumble, and others could only look up to him in awe. The Ink Poison King. Strange, according to the ripples in space, those 5 people have indeed appeared here. The Ink Poison King stretched out a hand, lightly rubbing. He was capturing the ripple in the regulations of space. I also sense the auras of 5 people, yet they have suddenly disappeared again, like they do not belong in this dimension. Strange. He searched in the surroundings, and the more he searched, the more astonished he was because Ling Han and the others really seemed like they had disappeared into thin air. Boom! Waves came to rise on the seas, and a massive sea dragon appeared, presently riding the winds and waves. I actually entered the territory of a dark dragon. The Ink Poison King frowned. There is not the slightest advantage in a fight. I had best withdraw first. If these 5 people are really nearby, then there will be no need for me to move at all, as they would die in the hands of this dark dragon. He was incredibly decisive, and immediately turned and left directly. In the distance, the sea dragon swam over, and roared furiously at the skies. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, stars fell from the skies. The might of a celestial king was really too frightening. Just a roar was capable of making stars fall from the skies. After a very long while, the sea dragon sank back into the great sea, and tranquility returned. Ling Han and the others stayed inside the Black Tower, allowing the sea waves to take them along. It should not be my fault this time, right? Ling Han asked. He had a halo of trouble following him and always managed to unconsciously cause trouble, but this time it was clearly unrelated to him. That is not definite. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said smilingly. If she had not been with you, husband, Hunyo might not have met with an ambush either. That's right, Hunyo hurriedly asserted with a nod. Ling Han laughed loudly and asked, Nyo, just what forces has your rock palace made enemies with? One is called Four Seas Palace. Their imperial empress is a lunatic that keeps wanting to eliminate our rock palace. And even Nyo has been dragged into the matter, Hunyo declared angrily. Ling Han and the others listened to Hunyo explain the details, and they were involuntarily moved. The Four Seas Palace was extremely large. Their master was a woman called Xianxia who had set her heart on destroying the rock palace, and this woman was a 9th heaven celestial king. Even in the entire celestial realm, her strength placed her as one of the very best. If it were not for the fact that the rock palace still had a senior elder that was struggling on whilst at death's door, forcibly holding on, this powerful force would have long since been razed to the ground. Even now, the rock palace did not have an easy time. The majority of their members were in hiding. The moment they left the territory of the rock palace, they could possibly encounter a frontal assault, turning their difficult efforts of cultivation for millions and millions of years into nothing. When Nyo becomes a 9th heaven celestial king, Nyo will definitely kick that lunatic's brat. No, ass-rape her. Hunyo growled angrily. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This little girl had definitely been led astray by him. Inside the Black Tower, they floated along with the flow of the water. At least a month had already passed, yet they still did not dare to leave the Black Tower. There was a celestial king standing guard outside waiting for them. So what was a mere months of drifting along worth? It was not safe at all. They did not waste their time either. They continued to cultivate inside the Black Tower, and since the upper limits of their cultivation level had been unsealed, there was no worry that they would be wasting time. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. They had already spent 100 years inside the Black Tower. Furthermore, they had also used the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower and the comprehension of Tao underneath the Reincarnation tree. Those like Ling Han, the Empress, and Hu Niu had already pushed their cultivation level to middle stage Yang Soul. Bewitching Maiden Ro was slightly inferior, but she was also close to middle stage Yang Soul. We should be able to go out now, right? They discussed a while, and decided that they could not stay forever inside the Black Tower. Ling Han's figure flashed, and appeared outside the Black Tower. Wang. Suddenly, a frightening aura swept over, and a colossal hand was grabbing over at a speed faster than lightning. Fuck, that Celestial King was still standing guard. Ling Han cursed internally, and hurriedly ducked back into the Black Tower. Ugh, he groaned lowly. He had indeed entered into the Black Tower, but he had still been swept a little by the Celestial King tier aura, causing at least 90% of the bones in his body to break, and they were all shattered at that. Too terrifying. The attack of the Celestial King had not hit him at all, but merely being swept by the aura had caused the physique that Ling Han had been so proud of to fully crumble. This was what a Celestial King was, the pinnacle of all. Every casual movement represented the Tao of heaven and earth. Ling Han, the Empress, and the others hurriedly gathered around him. Ling Han exhaled heavily and said through clenched teeth, "I'm fine. I won't die from this." "You still say that you're fine, but even your dick is destroyed." Hu Niu's expression was filled with grief. "Whoa, stupid Ling Han. You haven't had babies with Niu yet. Fuck. Where are your eyes looking?" Ling Han hurriedly channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid. Usually, when this drop of indestructible true fluid was channeled, his injuries should immediately recover in a very short amount of time, yet they did not do so now. Though he had just been slightly grazed by a Celestial King's aura, the martial intent of a Celestial King was still contained within. If it was not erased, even the indestructible true fluid could do nothing. After all, there was too large a disparity in the level of both sides. What kind of Celestial King is this, to actually ambush a few dividing soul tiers? Ling Han ridiculed. Could only be said that a Celestial King's patience was really too good. Who knew how many epochs he had been alive for? To him, waiting 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 1,000,000 years was nothing. Could not be said to pass in a snap of the fingers, but it was still no big deal. In comparison, the patience of Ling Han and his party was too poor. "I will heal my injuries first." Ling Han sat down at one side and stimulated the power of the Black Tower, trying to erase the willpower of the Celestial King. This was too difficult. What was a Celestial King? That was an existence that stood at the pinnacle of great Tao. Even if Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, erasing the willpower of a Celestial King was still as difficult as ascending the heavens. He endlessly fought with this streak of Celestial King tier willpower, commencing a tug-of-war inside his body, and making progress only with great difficulty. If this had not been inside the Black Tower, and if it had not been for the fact that he cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, which overwhelmed Celestial King tier in terms of level, there would have been absolutely no possible way that he could expel the Celestial King tier willpower. He would only be slowly obliterated by the latter. If it was not so overbearing, how could a Celestial King be qualified to be called as a Celestial King and stand at the pinnacle of Tao? Ling Han forgot all else and concentrated on resisting the Celestial King tier willpower. 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 100 years. Time passed quickly, and 100,000 years had passed inside the Black Tower, and Ling Han had finally gotten the upper hand. He had not achieved victory in this war, but merely gotten the upper hand. He finally knew how he should deal with this Celestial King tier willpower, and what made him even more pleasantly surprised was that through this kind of tug-of-war, his application of regulations had become even more meticulous and proficient. He had a feeling that his present battle prowess was definitely much stronger than it had been 100 years ago. Firstly, it was because his cultivation level had increased, and secondly, his grasp of regulations had reached a meticulous and detailed extent. Only in that manner would he be able to clearly understand the profound mysteries of the Celestial King tier willpower and be able to expel it. Of course, this was only a streak of aura from a Celestial King. If he had really been struck, then no matter how detailed his grasp of regulations was, it would have been completely ineffective. Ling Han continued to resist this streak of willpower and time passed swiftly. 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, and Ling Han finally opened his eyes once more. A whole 500,000 years had passed within the Black Tower. The Celestial King tier willpower had finally dispersed completely. It really was troublesome. A whole 600 years, and the time inside the Black Tower was 600,000 years even, and only then did he manage to expel a streak of martial intent. Ling Han, are you fine now? Hun Yo and the other women all approached. Ling Han nodded and said, I'm fine now and I can be considered to have profited from this disaster. His cultivation level had already reached late-stage Yang Soul. This was a genuine improvement, and the improvement that could not be seen was his practical use of regulations. The present he was a little like Ji Wuming. He clearly was at the same cultivation level as his peers, yet could drive others to despair. Don't know if that detestable guy has left or not, Hunyo said with a pout. He might not have left, but we have encountered a considerable number of huge waves in these several centuries, so we should have left that area far behind. Even the divine sense of a celestial king can only cover a limited area. We should have exited that area. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, preparing himself to flee immediately, but after waiting for half a day, the sea was still completely tranquil, and no one made a move to attack him. Wang! A large ship suddenly appeared in the distance, rapidly heading in his direction. Ling Han looked closely and saw that there was a flag raised on the large ship. The flag held a falcon that fluttered in the wind and looked very lifelike. This was a merchant ship. The boundless sea was not a dead area. Instead, there would be frequent merchant ships traveling to and fro. Though it was very dangerous, the profit was also extremely high. In the boundless seas, there were basically no rumors about pirates appearing. The danger mostly came from the sea itself. There were too many powerful living creatures here, and some of them could even make celestial kings frown. Thus, those traveling merchants that dared to do business on the boundless seas had to have elites acting as their protective escort. Young man, come on board. When the large ship passed him, it did not stop. Instead, a rope was thrown over and just stopped a foot away in front of Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a hand to grab it and pulled strongly. Then, his whole person flew forwards, and he landed steadily on the deck. Was your merchant ship attacked by a Sea King class? There was a large man standing on the deck, and the other end of the rope was grasped in his hand. In the boundless seas, those powerful immortal beasts that had reached Celestial King tier would be called Sea King class. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then replied, more or less. 2 Celestial Kings could also be considered Sea King class, right? If the Ink Poison King and the 7 Clouds King knew, they would definitely be fuming with rage. He had actually compared them to vicious beasts of the sea that lacked intelligence. Wasn't that mocking them? We are going to the Western Celestial Realm. If you are heading that way too, then we'll allow you to hitch a ride. However, there is no free lunch in this world. You would have to power the formation every day, and this will be considered your travel fee, the large man said. All right, Ling Han agreed. The large man arranged a room for him, and Ling Han would go to the bottom of the large ship, powering the formation every day with the other sailors, and exerting a driving force for the ship. After several days, Ling Han had also gotten familiar with all the sailors. This merchant ship belonged to the Qin clan, and the Qin clan was an ascending origin tier level force. The Qin clan had a total of 11 large-scale merchant ships, and every merchant ship would have an ascending origin tier grade elite standing guard. As long as they did not encounter any Sea King class, they basically wouldn't get into any form of trouble. The large man that had previously allowed Ling Han on board was named Qin Wei, and he was an Immortal Palace tier elite. He had a candid character, and was fond of making friends. If that had not been the case, he would not have meddled in other people's business, and given Ling Han a hand. On this day, Ling Han was presently resting inside the ship. The conditions here were very poor, so he did not release the 4 women, Shiryu and Shirlei. With a boom, the ship shuddered violently. What was it? Had they been attacked again? Pong! 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 The ship shook repeatedly, and the strength of the tremors was gradually increasing. "Oh no, we've encountered a giant tsunami wave," someone gasped. Ling Han sighed in relief. Ultimately, he was not a great bringer of calamity that would constantly attract all kinds of enemies. But thinking further, did natural disasters not count? He was very depressed. Could it be that there was not one time when he could just peacefully travel, have a meal, or take a nap? Everyone on the ship started moving. Those that had to go on the deck went, those that were to go to the helm went, and they were all making preparations to meet the tsunami. Ling Han also arrived at the deck. Casting his gaze further, he saw that a massive wave as tall as 30 kilometers had shockingly appeared ahead of them, and it was presently crashing down in their direction. And amidst the wave, he could also clearly see multiple seals rippling and glowing. Thus, this was not an ordinary large wave, but was the equivalent of an overwhelming blow from an elite, at least ascending origin tier in level. Ling Han stared at those seals for a while, and immediately came to a conclusion. To ask him to determine the cultivation level of someone that was stronger than himself was very difficult, but the seals of Great Tao could not be clearer. They could directly reflect the strength of an attack. This was definitely ascending origin tiers level. If Ling Han were to simply approach just like that, he would probably be crushed to pieces directly. "Quick! Everyone stimulate the protective formation!" someone called out loudly from the sidelines. Ling Han also leaped over. Since he had already boarded their ship, he naturally had to do his duty now that they had encountered danger. There was only a protective formation on the ship, but there were more than a dozen formation eyes, through which one could input origin power and activate the might of the formation. Ling Han did not keep anything reserved, and put his all into it. Wang, this formation eye immediately lit up. Wang, 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 the formation eyes lit up one after another, and the protective formation of the ship had also been activated, forming an oval-shaped shield of light. Pong, the waves assaulted, heavily slamming into the light shield, and causing the light shield to tremble for a while. This massive wave was not just a powerful attack, but was also a slam of power of regulations. Boom, boom, boom. The crest of the wave rolled past, and regulations endlessly struck, causing the protective light shield to become weaker and weaker. Boom, this massive wave finally passed completely, and the protective light shield also crumbled completely with a tremor. Thankfully, it was already over. If the protective formation had crumbled just a little bit earlier, they would all have been in big trouble. Yet before they could manage to feel joy, they saw that another massive wave was heading towards them. There was actually another. Everyone was stunned, and hurriedly went off to stimulate the formation again. Wang, with the concentrated and completely unreserved efforts of everyone, the light shield reappeared. Pong! The massive wave hit. The light shield trembled strongly, and looked to be on the brink of crumbling at any time. This time they were also very lucky. The protective formation had crumbled after the large wave had swept over it. But behind this giant wave there was a third one. Was there no end to it? No one had the time to curse as they once again stimulated the formation. The third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, these tsunami waves were practically endless. One after another came in assault, as if they would never stop. When more than 700 massive waves had swept over them, everyone was panting in fatigue, almost about to sprawl out in their weariness. Even if they were all celestials, they could not bear such expense, but for the sake of their lives, they had no choice but to expend themselves time after time. Those that had alchemical pills ingested them with all their might. Even if they could only recover just a bit of origin power, it was better than nothing. 800, 900, 1, 0, 0, 0. The massive waves came endlessly. Someone collapsed due to exhaustion. He had directly passed out. In this way, the pressure on those that were left naturally increased greatly as they would have to cover up for the shortage of that one person. 1,200, 1,400. Continuously there would be people collapsing not just at this formation eye but also at the other formation eyes. At first, Ling Han wanted to have the Empress and the others come out to give a hand, but he immediately dismissed the idea because there was too much of a gap. The three women would only be like a cup of water poured on a burning cart of firewood, completely incapable of causing any change to the present situation. Furthermore, this was still because there was an ascending origin tier grade elite who had been resisting the tides at the ship's bow. If it were not for the fact that he had dispelled a portion of the power of the waves, this massive ship would have long since been dismantled. Boom! 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 Crack! After about 1,500 massive waves crashed down on them, this large ship had also reached its limits and shattered loudly. Instantly, everyone was sent flying. Dive to the seabed, and you all are guaranteed not to die, that ascending origin tier elite shouted loudly. Everyone hurriedly dived because the crest of the next wave was already rapidly approaching. 30 meters? Not enough. 300 meters? Still not enough. 3,000 meters? Just barely. Some had not managed to dive to this depth in time, and when the massive wave swept over, they were instantly crushed into mush. The crest of a wave that contained ascending origin tier level power was really too terrifying. And the silver lining of all this was that this was only power at the ascending origin tier. If it had been at Celestial King tier, then all of them would only have been instantly obliterated. None of them dared to surface. On the contrary, they all tried their best to dive deeper. The deeper they dived, the safer they naturally would be. 1 day, 3 days, 10 days, after a total month, this bout of tsunami waves had finally slowed down. It had slowed down but not stopped. The might of the tsunami waves had already dropped to the severing mundane tier in level, but their coverage had widened instead. Furthermore, there was no rhythm to it at all. One moment they would be coming from their left, and the next they would come from their right, and at another moment they would come from below them. In this way, everyone had been separated. Ling Han surfaced from the sea and saw that there were merely 7 people around him. Coincidentally, Qin Wei, who had brought him on board, was also among these 7 people. Casting his eye further, Ling Han realized that there were also a few people very far away, but this number was much, much smaller than the initial number that had been on the large ship. Clearly, the majority had been pushed by the tsunami waves to a very far distance. Ling Han got hold of a piece of broken deck. The boundless sea was very unique. Swimming in it would be extremely straining. Unless there was no other option, no one wanted to waste the effort. The others did the same. Because there were not enough pieces of deck, some people would be sharing a piece between the 2 of them. Gradually, people gathered over, and when true peace had returned, there were only a total of 34 people there. The whereabouts of the others were unknown. They might have died, or they might have gathered to become a second large group. It was not that there was no ship, but to travel in the boundless seas, a special ship was needed, or they would very easily be sunk by the large waves. Thus, no one would waste a ship. They simply sprawled themselves out on the deck, going with the flow of the water and waves. To depend on one's effort to swim to the ends of the boundless sea was really just empty words. What everyone could hope for was that another merchant ship would pass by and take them on board. Ling Han had another hope, and that was Lu Herong. By now, she had to be looking for Hunyo everywhere, and finding him naturally meant finding Hunyo as well. After a few days, a strong wind began to blow on the seas. It was indescribably strong, causing everyone to ride on the waves, their speed even faster than they had been when they were on the ship. 7 days later, a dark shadow appeared ahead of them. "It can't be a Sea King class, right?" someone asked shakily. "That would be too terrifying. If they encountered a Celestial King tier beast, destroying them would only be a piece of cake." "No, that's an island. I think I see buildings as well. That's great. We can recuperate for a while there. Furthermore, the trees that grow in the boundless sea can be used to build a ship. We only have to set up some simple formations for travel, and we can then cross the seas." "That's right. As long as we don't meet with massive winds or waves, that would be enough." Everyone became excited and rowed strongly with their hands, heading towards the island. Easier said than done. The island did not seem particularly distant, but in truth it was overwhelmingly far away. After they had swum for around an hour, the island was still within sight, but it had become bigger and bigger than the initial tiny black dot it had once been. Firstly, this sea limited everyone's speed, and secondly, the island was indeed very far from them. But as the island became nearer and nearer, Even those with lower cultivation levels could clearly see the structures on the island. This island is not marked on the map, Qin Wei declared decisively. Those forces that did business on the seas would all draw maps. If they had encountered a natural disaster that could not be avoided just like now, they would swim towards the nearest island and wait to be rescued or save themselves. And this had indeed saved their lives a considerable number of times. To these forces, the more detailed and more accurate the map was, the higher the chances of their survival in crucial times naturally were. Though they had met with a natural disaster this time and experienced massive loss, if they could further complete the map of the Qin clan, they could still redeem a little of their losses. The coordinates of an unknown island could be sold off. Of course, this island would only be considered as a rescue station or a stopover. I have heard that the cultivators on the seas are all very ferocious, and some say that they are in the habit of feeding on human flesh. Someone suddenly spoke up in a shaking voice. Tui, where do these rumors come from? Immediately, someone else expressed their contempt for such lies. These are not completely baseless rumors. The living creatures in the sea have not become intelligent, so why would cultivators on the island have evolved? Another refuted. Don't think of causing disturbance to the military morale. Qin Wei humphed. He was the only immortal palaceteer in their group of 34 people, and naturally held absolute commanding power. The moment his words fell, no one else dared speak another word. The cultivators on the seas are also people who have migrated from our mainland. Their reasons vary. The majority have been forced away by their enemies, but there is also a small minority that has come out in search of treasure. Treasure! Hearing this word, a considerable number immediately pricked up their ears. They were instantly energetic, as if they had all forgotten that they were currently bathing in the waters of the boundless seas, and even returning to land was a problem. According to legends, there are rare treasures buried in the boundless seas. Qin Wei only said these words, but he did not go into too much detail. A great many people felt an itch in their hearts. But who would dare compel an immortal palace-tier great elite? Let's continue swimming. Everyone returned back to reality. Their main priority was still returning to land. If they were really trapped for endless years on a remote island, then all of them could go nuts. After another several hours, they had finally truly come close to the island. This was a very large island, its coastline as long as several hundred miles. However, in the boundless seas, this was actually a small island. Some islands could even be as large as a heaven. An island that was less than the size of a star actually could not be called an island, and could only be considered a slightly larger reef. No wonder this island has never been discovered in millions and millions of years, even if it is only over a dozen days away from the usual sea routes. As it turns out, it is too small. Qin Wei nodded. However, what was valuable about islands was that they could provide shelter, especially when large tsunami waves were wreaking havoc. Ships would only have the risk of capsizing, but islands would not need to worry about this problem, because they had already existed here for endless years. If they had been going to be sunk, they would have sunk a long time ago. Hua! Amidst the water moving, they were already pushed onto the coast, all of them completely exhausted. When they had tried their hardest to power the formation, they had already expended their origin power fully, and they had not had any time to recover after that. Instead, they had to resist the waves still and swim all this way. It should be known that the waves here in the boundless sea were not the slightest bit gentle, being capable of becoming a great problem even for dividing soul tears. Thus, the moment they landed, the majority of them were sprawled out in exhaustion, and felt a joy that came from getting a new lease on life. Now that they had landed on the coast, they really were safe. Qin Wei was an immortal palaceteer, so he naturally was much better than the rest. His figure rose up, and he surveyed this island from a higher spot. It was only several hundred miles in diameter, and for an immortal palace-tier elite, seeing it completely was only the matter of an instant. Hi's figure soon descended back down. With a frown, he announced, "The islanders are here." Those that were still lying on the ground and panting felt their hearts jolt. What kind of attitude did these islanders have? If they were weak, then it was fine. No matter what ideas they had, there was no need for them to give any regard. However, what if the other side's strength was close to theirs, or even enough to overwhelm them? Then they would have to pray that the other party bore no malice towards them. The island was very small. Thus, in just a short while, 3 people arrived by walking on air. These 3 people were all youths, 2 men and a woman. The 2 men were extremely handsome, each having their own unique traits. One was rough and manly, while the other was delicate. Meanwhile, the woman was extremely lovely and incredibly alluring. "Why have you come to our ascent route island, everyone?" the man with delicate features asked. "We encountered tsunami waves and have drifted here. Please provide us shelter for a few days. When we cut down some trees and build a ship, we will then leave," Qinwei said, without taking the other lightly. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and a hint of surprise was revealed in his eyes. He had a feeling that these 3 young people were very strong. They might be no match for him, but they should have Earth Soul level battle prowess or even be slightly stronger than that. But the problem was that he really had no way to estimate the cultivation levels of these 3 youths. Not one of them. To estimate the cultivation level of another, ordinarily one would have to be superior by a major tier, so it was very normal that Ling Han could not tell. But the anomaly lay in how he could not even sense if the other was severing mundane tier or dividing soul tier. This was like, the 3 of them had never cultivated before. Right, that was the feeling. But this was completely impossible because his instincts told him that these 3 people were not weak. Strange, too strange. "Oh, I see." The delicate-featured man nodded. "I can now welcome everyone's arrival on behalf of my master. Please, come and take some rest at our humble abode, and wash away the dirt of your travels. We can speak later about the matter of your leaving." "Many thanks." Qinwei nodded. "I am Xiao Jun." The man with delicate features introduced himself. "This is my junior brother Luo He, and this is my junior sister, as well as the only daughter of my master, Lan Ruaji." Qinwei also introduced himself, and vaguely related their experience of meeting with the tsunami waves, causing Xiao Jun and his party to be emotionally stirred. They expressed that this kind of tsunami waves were very rare, and they had not seen many such waves even in their lives of several million years. This caused a considerable number to be stunned. The 3 of them were clearly very strong, but they had actually just cultivated for a few million years? Inconceivable, really too inconceivable. "May I ask what your cultivation levels are?" Ling Han could not help but ask. This question was continuously winding around in his heart, and he had to speak his mind. "Ling Han, how could you be so abrupt?" Immediately, someone reprimanded him. The locals were willing to take them in, and were planning to be hospitable to them, and he actually asked them such a private matter. If they were angered and cast their whole group out, what were they to do? If they were weak, then it would be fine, but from the looks of things now, they were not the slightest bit weak. "That's right. How could you ask this kind of question at the first meeting?" Someone agreed. "This is just a person that had fallen into dire straits, and we had taken him on board. He actually does not have much of a relation with us." Another person began to draw a clear dividing line between them and Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head internally. When they had encountered disaster on the seas, everyone could still share their joys and sorrows together. But now that they were saved and had escaped, each of them showed their selfish nature. "Forget it. Since you all have no wish to continue sharing the same boat, I, too, will no longer care for your life or death." Ling Han waved a hand dismissively and smilingly said, "Since you people do not want to stick together anymore, this is where we part then." "Ling Han, you really are an ungrateful guy," someone rebuked. "Lord Qin kindly allowed you to board, yet you do not have the slightest feeling of gratitude. You really are a beast." "That's right. This is too inhumane. I am ashamed to be in the same party as you." Everyone rebuked him, and even Qinwei showed an expression of disgust. Ling Han was shocked. He had indeed been taken in by Qinwei, and this was a fact. But at the time they had an agreement. He had not boarded the ship as a guest, but would rather help in powering the formation, and provide power for the large ship. This was a fair transaction. Moreover, when the tsunami had taken place, had he not done his best? It could be said that without his all-out efforts, The large ship possibly couldn't have even held out until the final tsunami wave, and would have long since shattered. Then, just how many people would have been able to stand here and criticize him now would be a question that was left unanswered. On the other hand, Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, so there was no need for him to worry at all about life-threatening danger. Talking about ingratitude, these people were the truly ungrateful ones. Ling Han did not speak further. Since they had endured calamity together, he did not bother to lower himself to the level of these people, but had also drawn a clear dividing line between himself and these people. From now onwards, they were no longer the slightest bit related to him. It's all right. It's all right. Instead, it was Xiao Jun that smiled and played mediator. My master obtained a treasure that had been left behind by an ancient great elite, and cultivated a unique cultivation technique, and traveled another path. That is why everyone cannot distinguish our cultivation levels. Ancient great elite, unique cultivation technique. Everyone immediately became excited by these few words, and couldn't help but recall what Qinwei had said. There were treasures hidden in the boundless seas. It looked like the master of these three people had obtained a rare treasure. Anything that involved the ancient era meant that it was powerful. The three of us are the equivalent of Yang Soul, Luo, he continued. Oh! Everyone nodded. Yet Ling Han's heart shuddered. Yang Soul tier? But going by his instincts, these three possessed the battle prowess of Earth Soul at least, and he trusted his instincts very much. Then there was only one possibility left. These three people were all monarch tiers. 3 monarch tiers had appeared at the same time on a tiny island? Was this even possible? Ling Han thought that the chances of this were very small, but how could the abnormal strength of these three people be explained otherwise? Strange. Come this way. Xiao Jun and the others deliberately slowed their steps so that everyone could easily survey the scenery as they passed. The trees here were very tall, but they were all a myriad of colors and very beautiful. After walking for about an hour, they finally arrived in front of the structure that they had previously glimpsed. This was an ancient castle, and should have existed for many, many years. The walls of the ancient castle were covered with moss, exuding the aura of age that came with time. Please! Everyone had thought that it would only be Xiao Jun and the others that were residing here in this ancient castle, but they had not thought that there was really a considerable number of people present. There were men and women, old and young, and they were all cultivators. However, just like Xiao Jun and his group, no matter how strong they were, their cultivation level could not be identified. Though the others also thought this was strange, they did not take it to heart. That was because Xiao Jun had previously said that their master had obtained an ancient cultivation technique, taking a different path. In that case, it was very normal that they could not distinguish their cultivation levels. Ling Han, meanwhile, was even more curious. That was because he saw the 2 stone statues that were placed on either side of the doors when he entered through the great doors of the ancient castle. Those were 2 human figures, but wings sprouted from their backs, while their feet were like the hooves of oxen, and there was a long tail that trailed behind them as well, with horns growing from their foreheads. This kind of creature, Ling Han had never seen such before. Was it really as simple as having cultivated an ancient cultivation technique? The people inside the ancient castle were all very cordial. When they saw Ling Han and his group enter, they all rushed over and greeted them. Some took out food and wine, inviting them to be guests at their homes. Haha! Guests should suit the convenience of the host, and just relax, Xiao Jun said. Master is presently in seclusion. He may occasionally come out of seclusion, and then I will inform him. Perhaps Master would be very willing to receive all these guests. Everyone nodded. It was already very kind that the islanders were willing to provide them with temporary shelter. Whether the main host was willing to grant them an audience naturally depended on his mood. They did not dare be impudent either. There were a few people in the ancient palace that had frightening auras. Even if their cultivation level was not clear, they could feel that they were extremely strong, and should be comparable to Immortal Palace tier. Everyone had finally settled down. However, Xiao Jun had said that everything on the island belonged to the island master, who was also their master. Without obtaining the agreement of the island master, They could not take a single blade of grass or a twig from the island. Thus, everyone could not cut down trees to build a ship now, and could only silently wait for the island master to speak. However, a few days later, Xiao Jun once again appeared. It was still the three youths together, and they invited all the outsiders over as guests. With an invitation from the host, what more when they had something to ask of the other, they naturally could not refuse. Everyone arrived at the training ground of the ancient castle at the time agreed upon. Xiao Jun and his group were not the only people here. There were also a great many residents of the ancient castle here, but everyone was separated on two clearly different sides. Honestly, the training ground was not big, and there were only about 100 spectators' seats. However, the sparring area of the training ground used regulations of space. It looked small but was actually huge, so there was no need to worry that the fighters could not go into full swing due to limits of space. Everyone sat down, and maids served fragrant tea to them, so their reception was quite thoughtful. "Brother Xiao, has the island master spoken?" Qin Wei couldn't help but ask. He had the highest cultivation level out of their party of survivors, and was also a member of the Qin clan, so he had full reason to lead everyone back onto the mainland. Thus, what he was most concerned about was also the matter of their return. Xiao Jun shook his head, and said, "Lord Qin, don't be anxious. My master is presently comprehending a technique, and without his approval, none of us would dare disturb him without permission, so please stay here for some time longer." Qin Wei could only shut his mouth at this, and suppress the anxiety in his heart. "Brother Xiao, why have you invited us here today?" Someone who was rasher immediately asked. Luo he smiled and said, "All of us are cultivators, and we have stayed overseas for a long time, being overly subjective and disregarding the outside world. Thus, we would like to have a spar with all of you so we can also be made aware of our own inadequacies." Hearing these words, everyone showed an expression of pride. That was natural. You people had only obtained an ancient technique, but how could a single ancient technique be enough? The strength of cultivators would also be affected by celestial techniques, as well as battle experience, his own natural talent, and other such factors. In any case, being overly subjective and disregarding the outside world definitely would not do. If you could not overwhelm your opponent with your superior cultivation level, you would definitely be no match in a battle of equal cultivation levels. I am Feng Dang, and my cultivation level should be equivalent to the fourth severance. Which of you are willing to spar with me? A youth jumped out, his hair flying gracefully, having a kind of wild charm. I will. A person also leaped out from Qin Wei's party. But he was no young man. Instead, he was a middle-aged man that looked to be in his early 50s. However, in the celestial realm, age was definitely no issue, as long as they could bear up against the immortal's tribulation. Please. Feng Dang raised his clasped hands, and immediately charged out. Pong! A figure streaked past, and Feng Dang was the only person that was standing where he had once stood. Instant victory. Everyone had not even prepared themselves for it, and the battle had already ended. So fast. No, how could a battle of equal cultivation levels end so quickly? The opposing side had to have concealed his cultivation level, and used his superior cultivation level of dividing soul tier to suppress his opponent. But when they thought back carefully, they discovered that this theory was off too. Though they cultivated different cultivation techniques, the cultivation level would be clear the moment an attack was launched. Even though Feng Dang's actual cultivation level was still quite vague, it was definitely not the dividing soul tier, and they could confirm that fact. It was possible that he was a king tier, and was invincible among his peers. Everyone suppressed the shock in their hearts. After all, they were only a group of sailors and merchants, so how could there be king tiers among them? What king tier would come out to be a sailor or a merchant? I am Lu Yi, and my cultivation level is also the equivalent of fourth severance. Please. Another young man from the side of the ancient castle leaped out. Let me. Pong. One person from Qin Wei's party had just leaped out when he was sent flying with a single punch. He was completely no match for his opponent. This time, everyone on Qin Wei's side was moved. Could king tiers appear one after another like this? Looking closely at Feng Dang and Lu Yi, the aptitude of these two people really could not be considered all that impressive. What king tier did not have an amazing skeletal structure? In that case, they were not king tiers, nor did they have an advantage in cultivation level, so why did they possess stronger battle prowess? There was only one answer. The cultivation technique they cultivated was too powerful. Was that really the case? I am at Yang Soul tier, and I would like to seek guidance. Someone from Qin Wei's side leaped out, issuing a challenge to the ancient castle's side. I am Emohan. A young man walked out, strikingly handsome, and having a kind of might that could ensnare others. My cultivation level is equivalent to 5th severance. 5th severance. When these words were spoken, a great many people on Qin Wei's side looked puzzled and blank. 5th severance. What was the 5th severance? Wasn't the 4th severance the end of the line for the severing mundane tier? So where did this 5th severance come from? However, there were also some people that looked disbelieving, so stunned that their heads were about to explode. That was a monarch tier. Ling Han's eyes also lit up, the confusion in his eyes becoming more pronounced. Taking Xiao Jun and his group into account, that would be 4 monarch tiers. How did monarch tiers appear in the Eastern Celestial Realm? Accumulation through numbers. Using a population of 100 million as the basis, only a single monarch tier would be born, and merely having the aptitude of a monarch tier was not enough. Without a celestial king tier level background, which provided benefits such as the natural peach seal, how would he survive the heavenly tribulation of 5th severance? Could it be that there was a celestial king on this island? The population here was clearly pitifully few, yet 4 monarch tiers had actually appeared amongst them. This was not logical. Furthermore, just what the heck was the cultivation technique they cultivated? Ling Han thought back carefully, and suddenly a sense of familiarity rose up in him. He felt that he seemed to have seen the way these people fought somewhere else before, but no matter how much he tried to remember, it did not seem to match anything in his memories either. Pang! On the other side, Emohan had also begun fighting with the person from Qin Wei's side, and similarly had solved the issue with a single move. This was very normal. In terms of cultivation level, 5th severance was equivalent to Yang Soul, and those that could advance to this cultivation level were all monarch tiers, and could be invincible even with a gap of 2 levels. Then wasn't it very normal that they could win instantly with a single move? The spars continued. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, the ancient castle side had an absolute advantage, and even if they were weaker by 1 or even 2 minor levels, the ancient castle side could still manage to win. This gap in power was really astonishingly wide. Those on Qin Wei's side all lowered their heads. Their faces flushed red. Just now, they had thought themselves infallible, and thought that the people in the ancient castle were all overly subjective and disregarded the outside world, so their strength definitely would be very poor. But once they fought, they found out that every member of the opposing side was a fierce fighter, which naturally caused them much embarrassment. I really had not expected that everyone's strength would be so, hee. Xiao Jun said smilingly, wanting to say something, but hesitated at the end. However, everyone clearly understood the meaning that he wanted to express. And that was, you are all too weak. And you said that you would show us your skills? Yet each one of you are weaklings, not one capable of being a qualified match. These words caused their heads to dip even lower. A hint of mockery flashed through Xiao Jun's eyes, and he continued, Master has no intention of hiding secrets, so I am willing to share the cultivation technique that we cultivate with all of you. What? Hearing these words, everyone raised their heads, their faces filled with disbelief. Techniques would not be taught easily, and this was the ancient rule. To say nothing of an outsider, even with their own people such as father and son, that core secret technique could not be taught easily. Continuing with the example, a father would have to be sure that this son was worthy of being nurtured. For example, in a great clan, only a limited number of core clansmen would be able to cultivate the highest grade of cultivation technique, while the others would cultivate something that was slightly inferior. In any sect or clan, that was the case. Only the minority or even a single person could cultivate the highest level of cultivation technique. But now, Xiao Jun actually said that he would take out the cultivation technique that they cultivated and share it with all of them. Everyone exchanged looks and thought that they had heard wrongly. Was there really anyone that kind in this world? Actually, our cultivation technique is very simple. What is most important is to lend power, Xiao Jun said without concern. We believe in a deity of this heaven and earth, and only need to sincerely ask for his help during battle, and he would be able to bestow endless might on us. Are there any volunteers? We can try it out on the spot, and I guarantee that your battle prowess will immediately increase several-fold, or even tenfold. This filled many people with disbelief. Merely with them believing in a deity, their battle prowess would directly soar to as much as tenfold. I will. One of them jumped out. Believing was fine. If it was useless, then he could just give up the faith. Xiao Jun pulled that person over with a smile and whispered into his ears for a while. It was really just a short while, and that person skeptically walked to the training grounds and said, "Little Hai, come and spar with me. The two of us are close in strength, and we have frequently sparred. Whether my strength has increased or otherwise, it would become clearest after a spar with you." All right. A person from Qin Wei's party jumped out. The two of them began to fight, exchanging blows, and it was completely indiscernible which of them was stronger. It was useless. Believe in the deity. Xiao Jun spoke up, his voice slow and unhurried. That person from before suddenly became serious, his mouth muttering words. It was not known what he was saying. All of a sudden, he became stronger and began to beat down on his opponent. Then, he became stronger and stronger, his battle prowess having increased 4 to 5 times. Fuck, it really was doable. Everyone was stunned to the point of speechlessness. This was practically even better than ingesting celestial pills. You only had to believe in a deity, and your battle prowess would increase a good few times. One could not believe this but would also incredibly long for this. Young Master Xiao, can I cultivate this cultivation technique? That's right. Can I too? A considerable number immediately called out, their faces incredibly excited. No wonder there were so many king tiers and emperor tiers here. In fact, there were even a good number of monarch tiers here. So that was why. Xiao Jun showed a smile and said, Master has never cherished his own skill to coerce others. With the intention of benefiting the whole world, he is willing to share the unique cultivation technique with everyone. Hold on! A soft exclamation rang out, and Ling Han stood up. He leaped into the arena. My fists are itching as well, and I would like to spar. Just now, he had finally recalled why he would think that there was something familiar about the movements of those in the ancient castle. He remembered when he had been in the ancient realm, he had once entered into a mystery realm. There was a mysterious river flowing there, and there were a considerable number of tribes along the banks of the river. These people were all cultivators, yet belonged to a completely different system of cultivation. They did not cultivate regulations, or rather they did not cultivate the regulations of this heaven and earth. Their power originated from that mysterious river. Ling Han had once traced the river to its source, but he could not venture there. Only Xiao Gu went, and a massive battle had broken out. In the end, Xiao Gu had returned with injuries. This was exactly the same. Previously, Ling Han had not managed to recall it because those people from the ancient realm were too weak, and there was no possible comparison between the two. It was only now that he felt some kind of strange change taking place in those two statues by the doors, transmitting an amazing power to the person inside the arena, and only then did realization dawn on him. Clearly, everyone in the ancient castle was more covert when they borrowed power, or rather more proficient, and Ling Han was unable to sense it right until that newbie made an attempt just now, which finally allowed Ling Han to capture some traces of it. This was a completely new system of cultivation, but was also a system of cultivation that Xiao Gu despised to the extreme. Ling Han did not know the people here, but he knew Xiao Gu, so he was naturally on Xiao Gu's side. Furthermore, the methods of Xiao Jun and his party practically could not be more evident. It was a pretense that they were asking them for a spar, while the truth was that they were showing off their own strength, and thus tempting all of them to cultivate that so-called technique with them. There were indeed kind people in this world. This was a fact that Ling Han admitted, but was there anyone so kind that would take out his own cultivation technique to share with others? And furthermore, a group of complete strangers whose origins they had completely no idea about it that? This Ling Han did not believe. No matter what, he did not believe it. If something was too unusual, there had to be something off about it, and added with Xiao Gu's dislike, he naturally was going to stir up trouble. Aren't you guys showing off your superior strength? Then, I will be the one to beat down on you people, and let's see who's stronger then. This brother does not believe in our strength? Xiao Jun asked calmly. You should be in the dividing soul tier, right? Young Master Xiao. This person has no relation to us. That's right. We have drawn a clear dividing line between him and us a few days ago. Please don't allow him to be a reason for ruining our amicable relations. Those from Qin Wei's side all clamored, fearing that Xiao Jun would suddenly change his mind and say that he would not teach them the secret technique that could allow them to become powerful in an instant. Meanwhile, Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I am presently at the late stage of Yang Soul. In terms of cultivation level, you are a match for my junior brother. Xiao Jun turned his head and looked at Luo He. Junior brother. You go and spar with this brother. All right. Luo He stepped out and leaped into the arena. Ling Han raised his clasped hands. In polite courtesies, he made no mistake and made no mention at all of the fact that he had once seen this kind of cultivation system before. I am Ling Han. Brother Ling, please. Luo He raised his clasped hands, seeming very humble, but there was a hint of contempt in his gaze. Ling Han strode out and did not use any kind of movement technique. He merely strode out rapidly, quickly approaching Luo He. Luo He scoffed internally. His opponent was going to be serious right from the very first move and make it a close-quarters battle? He was filled with utter and complete disdain for these people of the celestial realm. All the expressions on his face were merely an act. See if I won't beat you up with just a single punch. He raised his fist. Boom, with a wave. There was no light of regulations, or a single flicker of any great Tao seals. Yet the attack carried an incredibly terrifying suppressive might. This was a completely different system of cultivation. Ling Han smiled faintly. Who cares what system of cultivation you cultivate? In the end, it's all down to battle prowess. He clenched his right hand into a fist and then launched a punch. Without any kind of technique and without any kind of logic, it was just a simple forceful punch. Pong! The punch landed, and Luo He's figure turned into a tiny black dot, crashing into the wall of the training ground. Thankfully, this place was deliberately used for the purpose of battle and was a different space. Otherwise, he would definitely have caused great damage with his collision with the wall. Even so, Luo He's whole person had still sunk into the wall. He coughed continuously, his face astonishingly pale. His complete silence fell. Everyone was looking at Ling Han with a stunned expression. The people of the ancient castle were stunned because they were sure that they were invincible in a battle of equal cultivation levels. Even if they were a minor level weaker, they could still turn the situation around. But now, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, Luo He could not even withstand a single blow from Ling Han. This was something they could not accept. And those people on Qin Wei's side were even more shocked. They had spent a longer time with Ling Han, but all of them had thought he was just an ordinary Yang Soul tier. Now that they had suddenly witnessed his true might, this was practically inconceivable to them. A considerable number of people wanted to stomp and pound their chests in frustration. Previously, they had actually drawn a clear dividing line between themselves and Ling Han. It should be known that this man was a monarch tier. What was a monarch tier? Only a prodigy that was destined to become a celestial king could be called a monarch tier. They were overwhelmed with regret. Previously, they had endured a calamity together, and this was the best chance for them to nurture a friendship. Yet it was they themselves that had spoilt this completely. Pigs, they really were as extraordinarily stupid as pigs. Brother Ling is indeed very strong. Xiao Jun showed a hint of seriousness, withdrawing the contempt that had existed all this while in his eyes. Being able to defeat Luo He with a single blow, this was powerful strength. Let me try. He stepped out. He was a minor level higher than Luo He, and could also defeat Luo He with a single strike. Otherwise, he definitely would not be asking for his own humiliation. Come then, Ling Han said calmly. His motive was very simple, and that was to make sure everyone knew that there was no need to believe in that so-called deity. The Tao of the celestial realm was also wide-ranging and profound, and was worth their diligent study. Xiao Jun leaped into the arena and assumed an offensive stance. Please, please, the two of them spoke at the same time, and then launched an offensive towards the other. Boom, boom, boom. The moment they clashed, both released powerful moves, holding no reservations at all. To Xiao Jun, he had to re-establish the powerful name and invincible reputation of the deity, so he naturally had to defeat Ling Han as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Ling Han wanted to set things right. Similarly, he wished to defeat his opponent to show that he was right. Destroy this place if you can. Small Tower suddenly piped up. And Ling Han paused. He had indeed wanted to ruin Xiao Jun and his group's conspiracy, but had not planned to destroy them. There are rules in the heaven and earth. This kind of completely different system of cultivation can be considered a challenge to or even a betrayal of the heaven and earth. And when there are many people who cultivate this kind of cultivation technique, it could even shake the regulations of heaven and earth, causing this whole space to collapse, Small Tower explained. That's serious? Ling Han frowned. At first, he purely wanted to cause trouble, but if it really involved the survival and continued existence of this space, then everyone had a duty to act. He gave a E and asked, the system of cultivation here should be the same as what we saw at the ancient realm. Why didn't you say this at that time? Are you an idiot? Small Tower said in disdain. At that time, just how much of my memory had recovered? How could I have possibly known this? Right, no matter what, it was in the right. In any case, it was fine as long as Ling Han knew the proud Tower's temper, and there was no need to take it to heart. All right, then he'd just beat this guy up first. Ling Han roared and unleashed his full battle prowess. Instantly, his power increased over tenfold. Just now, he had been distracted and conversed with Small Tower. This naturally affected his battle prowess, and now once he was making an all-out effort, it was like he was a changed person. Everyone watched with captivated eyes. Those who were weaker in strength could not even catch sight of the two fighters. What more distinguish which of the two of them had the upper hand at present? But those who were passable in strength all showed expressions of shock. Previously, it was Xiao Jun who had the upper hand, but later it was like Ling Han had been pumped full of adrenaline. All of a sudden, he had become indescribably strong, and it was he now that was beating down on Xiao Jun. Meanwhile, Luo He's and Lan Ruaji's expression were filled with disbelief. In their eyes, Xiao Jun was an invincible prodigy, yet now, even when he was at an advantage in terms of cultivation level, he was actually still incapable of restraining Ling Han. Instead, he had now fallen into a disadvantage. Impossible! How could this be? Those on the ancient castle side all paled in great shock. They were filled with absolute confidence in the cultivation technique they cultivated and the deity that they worshipped, and reality had also proven that their system of cultivation was really superior and noble uncountable times. Did you think that Ling Han and his group were the first people to come to this island? You would be wrong. Who knew how many batches of people had come here? But after they had arrived here, there had never been any who left. But now, an outsider whose cultivation level was inferior to Xiao Jun could actually beat down on Xiao Jun. It should be known that Xiao Jun was the best in terms of natural talent among them. If even Xiao Jun would be defeated, then there would be no one capable of being a match for Ling Han in the same cultivation level. This had overturned the superiority complex that they had maintained for all this while, and also caused a sliver of crack to appear in their confidence, shaking the belief that they had in their deity. Xiao Jun roared furiously, trying his best to turn his disadvantageous position around, but all that was merely wasted effort. Ling Han was simply stronger than he was. Though he was not very much stronger, when one had reached the level they had, how could they afford the slightest gap? When the battle had progressed to close to 1,000 exchanges, Ling Han shot out a kick. Peng, Xiao Jun was sent flying, and crashed solidly into the wall. Brother Ling is indeed strong. Xiao Jun rubbed the discomfort in his chest, and forced out a smile. Ling Han smiled faintly, and replied, "Good battle." He did not listen to Small Tower's words and directly killed the man, because this was the latter's territory. There were a good number of Immortal Palace tier-level elites alone, and that island master that had been in seclusion all this while was even likely to be an ascending origin tier. If he killed anyone, that would mean turning completely hostile without any way out. Hearing Xiao Jun admit defeat personally, those on the ancient castle's side all broke into a commotion. The deity that they had believed in all this while practically crumbled in an instant, and they could not accept it. Xiao Jun was unconcerned, however. Instead, the smile on his face became even more pronounced as he said, "Brother Ling's natural talent in cultivation is really astonishing, and if Brother Ling is willing to switch to cultivating the vein of cultivation technique of my master, I can guarantee that Brother Ling's strength will improve to another level." When everyone heard this, they all nodded. Just now, that other person had just believed in some deity, and his battle prowess had improved 4 to 5 times all of a sudden. If the same logic was applied on Ling Han, just how strong would he be by then? And also precisely because of this, the people on the ancient castle side also recovered their confidence quickly. That was right. What conflict did Ling Han being strong have with their deity being strong? As long as Ling Han was willing to switch to believing in their god, Ling Han would be able to become even stronger. Then, didn't that mean that there was not the slightest bit of mistake in their choice? Seeing the increasingly heated gazes all around him, Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. Looks like all his actions previously had been wasted effort. Firstly, these people were too captivated, and secondly, Xiao Jun's adaptability was extremely impressive. Otherwise, he only had to fly into a humiliated anger, and it would deepen the doubts in everyone's hearts. The situation would definitely not have been like it was now. Interesting. He was a good opponent. A smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. Though Small Tower's words were very frightening, to actually be able to shake the foundations of the heaven and earth, who knew how many people were needed to cultivate this cultivation technique to be able to accomplish that? As for merely those 30-odd people gathered here, no more than a drop in the ocean. Then he'd just play and cause a great disturbance. The best scenario would be waiting until Lu Herong came here, and sweeping this entire place over with a single push. To those who stayed in this heaven and earth, the people of the ancient castle were akin to vermin that would affect the existence of the heaven and earth. Though it was now a majestic tower and was definitely not something that a few bugs could damage, if these bugs were not quickly stomped on, who knew how far they would develop? Just like the 30-plus people today being bewitched by Xiao Jun and his group, how many of them would throw themselves into these welcoming arms? This kind of poisonous vermin should be eliminated immediately. "Young Master Xiao, please teach us the celestial technique," someone called out shamelessly. "Please teach the celestial technique." Even more people called out. A slightly proud expression appeared on Xiao Jun's face. A situation that could have possibly been complete chaos had returned to the original course with just a few words from him, and even he could not help but want to cheer for himself. "There is no need to rush. My master has a great wish to teach the technique to the world, and definitely would not keep the treasure to himself," he said with a slight smile, seeming extremely sincere. This touched the outsiders incredibly, and they felt that the island master was really the kindest and most benevolent person in this world, being willing to teach a supreme cultivation technique without any reservations. There was definitely no other person that could be as generous as that. Ling Han smirked internally. At first, he had been curious why Xiao Jun was so determined to teach the cultivation technique of his master, but through Small Tower's explanation, Ling Han now knew that this was an invasion. Once it succeeded, to the entire celestial realm, to the celestial realm, ancient realm, and all other small worlds, it would be an absolute calamity. And going by that logic, the explanation of their island master being presently in seclusion, and thus unable to decide whether to allow them to cut trees, was actually a falsehood. Their motive was merely to prevent them from leaving the island. "Those that are willing to cultivate this cultivation technique, please come with me," Xiao Jun announced loudly. Immediately, practically everyone followed behind him. Aside from Ling Han. Ling Han was stunned. Even Qin Wei had fallen for it? Very soon, the people here had all left. Aside from Ling Han, only Lan Ruaji, this delicate and bewitching woman, was still seated in a graceful position. Her arms were stretched out and placed on the chair's backrest, causing her breasts to become even more pronounced. A smile appeared at her lips, while her alluring eyes were filled with challenge. Ling Han was unlike the others, who were easily hooked. This spiked her interest. She wanted to personally pull Ling Han over to their side. And once she succeeded, she would have her 17th consort. That was right. She enjoyed playing with men, and any man that she had her eye on, no matter how much of a prodigy he was, would not be able to resist her charms. Young Master Ling is really so awesome. Having been here on this island for so many years, this is the first time I have seen eldest senior brother defeated in a battle of equal cultivation level, she said delicately, her voice like honey and incredibly melodious. Ling Han smiled faintly and stated, "There are about 1 or 2 dozen people like me in the Eastern Celestial Realm at least, and there would be even more in the Western Celestial Realm. Who cared whether there really was or not? He would just brag first and find out later." Meanwhile, Lan Ruaji smiled alluringly. "Young Master Ling, just now eldest senior brother asked you if you were willing to join us. A supreme technique will be taught to you, so even while your cultivation level does not change, your battle prowess would increase tenfold at least. Wasn't it said that your father has the wish to spread his technique without any reservations? Why is there a need to join you?" Ling Han asked smilingly. "Spreading the technique is one matter, but the truly amazing part will only be taught to the innermost core portion of people. Isn't that right, young Master Ling?" Lan Ruaji suddenly straightened her upper body. When she said, "Isn't that right?" she tapped her finger lightly on her breast. Underneath the tight-fitting fabric, the outline of her extremely seductive plump breasts was fully displayed. Ling Han ignored it completely. In terms of looks, there was no way she could catch up to the Empress and Hunyo. In terms of bearing, the Empress left her behind in her dust. In terms of allure, bewitching Maiden Ro was completely out of her reach. Even bewitching Maiden Ro was unable to move him. What more this kind of woman? Thoughts streaked through Ling Han's mind like lightning. If he was to destroy the force on this island all alone, this was completely unrealistic. Then, there were only 2 paths laid out in front of him. First, wait for Lu Herong to arrive, and then destroy this place. Second, he could feign civility with them first, and then take the chance to build a ship and leave. Then, he could come back later to destroy this place. Whichever the case, he could not immediately turn hostile with them at present. Thus, Ling Han thought for a moment and said, "On the contrary, I am slightly interested now." A proud smile appeared on Lan Ruaji's face. She was confident that her charm was unmatchable. How could Ling Han possibly be capable of resisting? This really was her being arrogant and narrow-minded. Just how many people were there in total on this tiny island? She was indeed pretty and alluring, and naturally had become an unrivaled bloom. However, if she was in the Eastern and Western Celestial Realms, though she could still be considered a beauty, she still was some way away from the extent of an exquisite beauty. It could not be helped that she had never seen truly beautiful women, and naturally thought herself to be overwhelmingly beautiful. "Come, young Master Ling, I will show you around," she invited. She should feel lucky that Hunyo had not appeared now. Otherwise, the latter would definitely have sent a slap straight at her. Ling Han nodded. This was just good, as he indeed wanted to get to know this island better. The 2 of them first walked around inside the ancient castle. Previously, their range of movement had been restricted, but now with the daughter of the island master leading the way, he naturally could go anywhere freely. Where does this place lead to?" Ling Han asked, pointing at a pair of stone doors. Previously, Lan Ruaji would directly push the doors open whenever they met with doors blocking the way, but now she completely ignored these stone doors. Ling Han examined these great doors closely. There were actually formation patterns inscribed on them. Clearly, there was a formation laid out here. If one could not unravel the formation at the first instant, the formation would either attack the invader harshly, or proceed to raise an alarm. Lan Ruaji smiled delicately and said, "This you would only have the right to find out after you truly become one of us." "So mysterious?" Ling Han pretended to be very curious. Hee. Yet Lan Ruaji's lips were sealed very tightly, and she did not leak out the slightest bit of information. Instead, she dragged Ling Han away with her. Afterwards, When Ling Han repeatedly drew the conversation back to this topic, Lan Ruaji kept using the same excuse to evade the topic. Only one who had become a member of the ancient castle would have the right to know further secrets. The two of them walked on, and soon had completed their rounds of the entire ancient castle. Ling Han suddenly frowned. He had sensed an unusual aura. What is it? Yet Lan Ruaji did not sense anything at all. Ha 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 ha. As expected of a prodigy among prodigies, to have discovered my presence so quickly. A long bout of laughter was heard, and a man with lanky build walked out from behind a massive stone pillar. Fourth uncle. When Lan Ruaji saw him, she hurriedly greeted him politely. Ling Han also surveyed this man. He looked very young, his black locks hanging haphazardly over his shoulders, and his features were also very handsome. Most importantly, this man was very strong, giving Ling Han a feeling of unfathomable depths. I heard that someone defeated Xiao Jun, so I came to take a look for myself, this young man said. In any case, age could not be distinguished from the appearance in the celestial realm. It was possible that a gray-haired old geezer would have to address a young brat as great-grandfather. This is Ling Han, Lan Ruaji introduced. This is my fourth uncle, Lan Tianyu. Ling Han raised his clasped hands slightly and said, Lord Lan. Lan Tianyu flicked out a finger. Wang, he summoned a circular ring, which encircled all three of them. In Ling Han's eyes, the world had enlarged indefinitely. He had immediately appeared in an expansive and boundless grassy plain, and from the outside, it was clearly Ling Han and the others that were rapidly shrinking down, becoming who knew how many times smaller than even a tiny rice grain. This was a spatial god tool, but it was not the type to directly draw others in. Instead, it affected the surrounding environment. Ling Han could directly fly off and leave. He only had to exit this area, and he naturally would be able to return to his original state. He was slightly displeased. Though he did not fear challenge, the action of directly pulling him into a battle zone without his agreement caused a strong feeling of dislike to rise up in him. This kind of person was asking to be beaten. Come, show me. Lan Tianyu pounced, charging out towards Ling Han. He naturally cultivated the other kind of cultivation system. As he sent out a palm strike, there was no ripple of great Tao, nor was there any light of regulations of the great Tao. There was only a shadow enshrouding his palm, exuding an unmatchable evil, yet also astonishingly powerful. Ling Han's hands balled into fists, and he greeted the incoming attack. Pung, pung, pung. The two of them were embroiled in an intense battle. In a short instant, they had exchanged over a dozen blows. Lan Ruaji watched with starry eyes. Although she, too, had monarch tier-level strength, she still felt like she was unable to watch the battle clearly. These two people were too powerful. She was naturally clear and familiar with how strong Lan Tianyu could be, but what stunned her was Ling Han, as he was actually capable of exchanging blows with Lan Tianyu. It should be known that Lan Tianyu was even stronger than Xiao Jun. She knew that Ling Han had defeated Xiao Jun, but definitely did not think that Ling Han would have strength to match Lan Tianyu. But now, facts spoke louder than words, causing her to watch with wide eyes, and making her passion burn ever brighter. She liked powerful men as they would bring her a feeling of accomplishment that was incredibly amazing. Unfortunately, though there was no lack of handsome men among the young and middle-aged men that had drifted onto their island, none of them was as strong as her in a battle of equal cultivation levels. And now Ling Han had popped out, causing her to ignite all of a sudden. Boom! 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 Ling Han and Lan Tianyu were still exchanging blows. They would be fighting rapidly at times, exchanging several dozen blows in a mere instant, but sometimes they would also be fighting extremely slowly, only launching an attack after being in a stalemate for 3 to 4 breaths. But in reality, the slower the attacks came, the higher the danger level was. Both sides were releasing powerful moves, and their destructive ability would be higher. Of course, this danger was actually referring to Lan Tianyu. With Ling Han's physique being as strong as it was, there was basically no one in the dividing soul tier capable of killing him. If it was not for the fact that he was unwilling to reveal this trump card, he would be completely capable of using his own injuries to trade for injuries with his opponent. And then Lan Tianyu would tragically discover that he would be covered with injuries, close to death, but Ling Han would be completely fine. Lan Tianyu was indeed stronger than Xiao Jun, and it was not just by a little bit either, putting an extremely great pressure on Ling Han. Going by Ling Han's estimation, this man's true battle prowess should be equivalent to peak stage Earth Souls level, and then after extracting the so-called deity's power, his battle prowess would soar into early stage Heaven Souls level, or even the extent of middle stage. This was enough to match Ling Han. In fact, this was slightly superior to Ling Han. Thus, this was the real reason why there were so many monarch tiers and emperor tiers on the island. That was not their true battle prowess. Fourth uncle, is it fine now? Lan Ruaji called out from the side. All right. Lan Tianyu stopped, a prideful expression appearing on his face. Though victory was still undecided, he had enough confidence that he would have had the upper hand in just a few more moves. And he was sure that Ling Han, too, knew this fact. Since he already got the upper hand, he naturally would be satisfied with ceasing the battle. After all, the reason for his exchanging blows with Ling Han was not for killing this young man, but so that the latter would know that there was still someone capable of suppressing him here. Ling Han also smiled faintly. In terms of battle prowess, it was indeed Lan Tianyu that was just that slight bit stronger. That was because Ling Han's own cultivation level was too low, and in terms of genuine battle prowess, he would be able to kill the other man single-handedly. Depending on external power, even if the other party won, what would be the point? You can indeed borrow power now, but would you be able to keep borrowing it? Is it guaranteed that you could do it in every corner of the celestial realm? Can you guarantee that you can still do the same in Celestial King tier? That Ling Han was not going to believe. This borrowed power did not come from the heaven and earth, but from some powerful existence, such as a ninth heaven Celestial King. But a ninth heaven Celestial King was not omnipotent. For example, if a ninth heaven Celestial King wanted to borrow power, how was he going to borrow it? Compared to this kind of thing, Ling Han was more trusting of his own strength. Lan Tianyu had achieved his purpose in this battle. With loud laughter, he strode off. Young Master Ling, don't take it to heart. Firstly, fourth uncle's cultivation level is above yours, and secondly, you have not been blessed by the deity yet. Otherwise, you too would be able to borrow power from the deity, and you would definitely not be weaker to fourth uncle then. Lan Ruaji comforted. Ling Han naturally wouldn't take it to heart. If it was a life or death battle, he could guarantee that the person that would die would definitely be Lan Tianyu. However, there was no need to say these words. Firstly, Lan Ruaji would think that he was a sore loser, and secondly, he had no wish to reveal his trump card anyway. Young Master Ling, let us go and prepare the ceremony to offer sacrifices. Who knows, my father may also appreciate your natural talent, and perhaps will wish to take you as a disciple, Lan Ruaji said, seemingly thinking that Ling Han could no longer escape from her gentle trap. Ling Han's heart moved, and he asked, what cultivation level is the Lord Island Master at? Lan Ruaji hesitated slightly, but still answered, Father is equivalent to an ascending origin tier elite. Ascending origin tier. Ling Han nodded internally. The strength of this island was extraordinary. If this was in the Eastern Celestial Realm, this would be a genuine 4-star force which was considerably powerful. Led by Lan Ruaji, Ling Han arrived in a room inside the ancient castle. Those like Qin Wei and his group were all here. Everyone was waiting. They had to first bathe and burn joss sticks, and only after a whole 3 days would they be able to officially enter under the banner of that deity. Ling Han got familiar with the sequence of events. In this process, he would have to offer a sliver of his spirit respectfully to that deity. It was just a little bit, and would definitely not have any effect on him personally. But this was something that Ling Han definitely couldn't accept. Firstly, to cultivate to the highest cultivation level, the spirit had to maintain the state of an absolute whole. Secondly, there were a great many evil techniques in this world that depended on the use of blood and spirit to cast. To split out a portion of his spirit to be given to another was equivalent to placing his own life in the hands of another. How could that be condoned? As expected, the so-called teaching the technique to all and the so-called deity were all false. How could there be any free lunch in this world? But looking at Qin Wei and the rest, they all looked completely unconcerned. Their yearning for further improvement of their strength had already surpassed all else. For them, to say nothing of Celestial King tier in this life, they might not be able to reach even Ascending Origin tier and Immortal Palace tier. Then why should they be concerned about how complete their spirit was? As for having their lives being under the control of another, that was something that they had not thought of at all. At present, their minds were filled with thoughts of having a chance to improve their strength without expending any effort. Everyone, are you all really going to believe that there would be such a good thing in this world? Taking advantage of the fact that they were the only ones sitting quietly here, Ling Han spoke up. He had no intention to save these people, and merely wanted to cause trouble for the ancient castle side. Ling Han, what do you mean? Someone immediately jumped up. Could it be that you wish to enjoy the blessing of the deity alone? Ling Han was stunned. His intentions had actually been misinterpreted thus. You are already a monarch tier, and can be considered invincible in your cultivation level. Even if we were blessed by the deity, we cannot possibly become stronger than you, so why do you have to envy us? That's right. I hate people like you that cannot bear to see others benefit. And you call yourself a monarch tier with that kind of limited tolerance? Hey, because Qin Wei was seated there, they were not the slightest bit reserved with their words. In any case, they would be having the deity as their powerful backer in the future, so what did Ling Han being a monarch tier, or becoming a celestial king, have to do with them? Without need, they naturally could hold their heads high in front of Ling Han. This seemed to have ignited the passion of the masses. They began to spout out words of crusading against Ling Han all at once, as if Ling Han had done some heinous deed. Every half an hour, someone would come in to add another joss stick, and when the time came for the next edition, someone quietly pulled the person who was adding the joss stick aside and said something quietly to him. The person left, and Xiao Jun appeared only after a while, beckoning towards Ling Han as he said, "Brother Ling, please come with me for a word." Ling Han was sure that he had been told on. He was curious to see what the other would do. He stood up and walked outside by Xiao Jun's side. "Brother Ling, do you still have some doubts regarding the deity that we believe in?" Xiao Jun asked calmly. "Of course not." Ling Han pushed the blame off himself cleanly. "But someone has told me that Brother Ling's resolution does not seem to be very firm," Xiao Jun said smilingly. "Would Brother Xiao believe me, or choose to believe a piece of trash?" Ling Han countered with his own question. Xiao Jun couldn't help but pause quietly. After a while, he suddenly laughed loudly and said, "I naturally believe Brother Ling." Ling Han only smiled slightly. Who cared if Xiao Jun believed or not? In any case, when the time came, Ling Han would definitely cause great trouble, and then duck into the Black Tower to take refuge. An Ascending Origin tier elite would not be able to do anything to the Black Tower, and what he had to take care about was only to avoid being killed before he successfully hid in the Black Tower. Boom! Just at this moment, the whole island shook with a tremor, as if an earthquake had taken place. Xiao Jun was at a loss at first, which was quickly followed by a shocked expression. "Oh no! The beast tide has come in assault." Woo! Just at this moment, the strange sound of a horn rang out. Immediately, the whole ancient castle was alerted. "All of you come out. The beast tide is here." Xiao Jun shot quickly into the meditation chamber, calling out to the masses. "What beast tide? Are there any beast tides on the boundless seas? I never heard about this." Everyone exchanged looks, all appearing to be very confused and completely blank. "Speak less rubbish, and come out quickly." Yet Xiao Jun called out harshly. This kind of attitude involuntarily caused a considerable number of people to feel displeased. Previously, he had repeatedly addressed them as respected guests, allowing them to enjoy fully the royal treatment. Yet now his attitude had changed completely, and he kept shouting at them. This change was really too massive. Ling Han sneered internally. The reason why the ancient castle's people had been so courteous was merely because they wanted them to switch to cultivating the other system of cultivation, and before achieving their motive, they would naturally be incredibly cordial. However, the appearance of this beast tide seemed to have disrupted their plans. "If we cannot beat the beast tide, all of us will be dead," Xiao Jun continued. These words were filled with impact. Everyone hurriedly jumped up and quickly ran outside. Xiao Jun suddenly turned his head and solemnly said to Ling Han, "Brother Ling, please give your all." Ling Han smiled and said, "We are in the same boat. We naturally should be working together." "All right." The two of them were the last to walk out. When they walked out of the ancient castle, they saw that the people of the ancient castle had all moved out and were going towards the west. 3 sides of Ascent Route Island end in a steep cliff, where killing formations are placed. The beast tide cannot charge upwards along cliffs, and can only bulldoze from the western coast, Xiao Jun explained. His figure turned into a wisp of mist, moving along with the crowds. Ling Han followed behind him, yet his mind was beginning to wander. Since they could lay out killing formations on 3 sides, why couldn't they do the same for all 4 directions? It was highly possible that they had walled 3 sides while allowing the last side to be open on purpose, so that those who had encountered sea perils and drifted here could set foot on the island, and allow them to propagate their deity. Furthermore, Qin Wei and the others had previously felt curious why there would be a beast tide on the seas. These people had always traveled on the boundless seas, so they should have considerable experience, but even they had never known the fact that there would be beast tides on the seas. Why would it happen on this tiny island, then? Just exactly what secrets were hidden on this small island? Ling Han suddenly became extremely curious. As Ling Han's thoughts whirled, he arrived on the western coast of the island. The moment he arrived, he was immediately stunned by the scene that met his eyes. This was too grandiose. Marine creatures that numbered in the tens of thousands were presently surging towards the island. Some were already closely approaching, and were presently launching a fierce offensive. For example, a walrus that was 3,000 meters tall was presently using its gigantic body to crash into the island. Only a single collision, and the whole island would tremble, as if it was about to be fragmented by the crash. Or another example. A massive lobster was using its twin pincers to send out slashes onto the coast. Multiple seals of Tao covered its pincers, shining brilliantly. However, the island had also long since set up the first line of defense, stopping these marine creatures from invading further. Furthermore, though there were a great many marine creatures, and they were very big, their quality was quite unevenly spread out, and only a few rare ones were really strong. Thus, strictly speaking, they had only come to deliver themselves to death. A resident of the island sent out a punch, and a black-colored flame blazed. One punch was capable of insta-killing 10 marine creatures. Another waved a sword in a slash, and again black-colored sword chi filled the skies. Blood spurted in all directions, and masses of marine creatures collapsed. There were also powerful marine creatures among the tide, like a golden yellow frog. As it opened its mouth, it would send out golden light that turned into golden arrows. Shoo, 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 wherever it landed, it would immediately cause a great many island residents to suffer severe injury. "Let me!" A loud shout rang out, and Lan Tianyu charged out, blocking this giant frog, and they both began an intense battle. And there were fierce battles taking place everywhere on this western coast. There was a very large gap in strength among the marine creatures, but there was no shortage of elites among them. There was an immortal palace tear clam that created a terrifying hurricane capable of destroying everything as it opened and closed its shell. There was also a 6-legged green crocodile that spat out seals capable of shaking the heavens and shattering the ground from its mouth. Intense battles were happening everywhere. No one could slack off, and what was more frightening was that there were endless marine creatures that were presently surging over from the depths of the seas. It was just like the people on this island had killed their king or their prince, and they were now here to get revenge at all costs. Merely a day had passed, and the coast of the island was already covered with corpses. Blood had dyed the waters of the surrounding area red. However, those that had died were basically all the marine creatures, and the casualties on the side of the humans were still 0. But those like Qin Wei and the others were already running out of origin power. Furthermore, they were continuously drawing on the power of regulation. Their spirits were also weary and battered, and their battle prowess could possibly drop from the peak to rock bottom at any moment. The exertion in the battle was too harsh. Otherwise, with the accumulation of origin power that a celestial had, they could at least continue fighting for more than half a year's time. Just think of how they had previously encountered the giant tsunami, and one would know. It had only been several hundred waves, and the formations had sucked all of them dry, causing them to collapse in fatigue. On the other hand, those on the ancient castle side were all still looking very energetic, and there was completely no display of weariness. This was the amazing trait of the other system of cultivation, or was it a benefit of believing in that deity? Power of sacrifice. Small Tower suddenly spoke up. Sacrifice. Ling Han frowned. He had naturally heard of the matter of sacrifice. For example, if some place was too violent and inauspicious, then a sacrifice could possibly remove the inauspiciousness. In the ancient realm, the Eternity Sky Emperor had also organized a large-scale sacrifice for the sake of obtaining the Nine Demons' Sword so that the murderous aura of the Nine Demons' Sword could be removed. This place was also preparing a sacrifice? While what was being sacrificed was naturally these marine creatures, what was the sacrifice meant for? Small Tower did not speak further. Instead, it channeled the Black Tower. Instantly, a majestic power surged up, actually causing all the marine creatures to tremble and cease their attacks at the same time. In the boundless sea, practically all the living creatures had not gained intelligence, and they were all in the primal state. But the more primitive they were, the more sensitive these marine creatures were to powerful beings. For them, the Black Tower was a supreme existence. However, it was only a mere instant, and when the power of the Black Tower surged over, the marine creatures regained their ferocity and began to launch a fierce offensive once more. Brat, while you are a bringer of calamity, your luck seems to be extraordinarily good. Small Tower spoke again. Are you praising me, commending me, or complimenting me? Ling Han asked with a grin. Your skin is really quite thick. Hee hee. Small Tower paused and continued. There is a source power of heaven and earth beneath this island. What? Ling Han got a shock. Really? He naturally would not suspect Small Tower. While this guy was at Sundara, there seemed to have never been any previous instance in which it had been joking, and would never use this kind of matter to deceive him. What type is it? He asked quickly. Metal element, Small Tower said. Firm essence green gold. Metal element. Ling Han's heart involuntarily jolted. He already had 3 source powers of heaven and earth, and they were water, fire, and wood, and now, if he could gain another metal element source power of heaven and earth, he would be one step closer to having 9 source powers of heaven and earth to complete his dividing soul tier. Hold on, you were speaking about sacrifice just now. Could it be that sacrifice is for the sake of retrieving the firm essence green gold? The nature of metal element is violent and murderous, so to retrieve the source power of heaven and earth, you would have to first remove the air of violence of the firm essence green gold. Otherwise, this would be equivalent to having a celestial king blast his aura madly. Not even ascending origin tier could stand against that. Moreover, the people on the seas have never heard of beast tides, but it has suddenly broken out here. This means this beast tide is possibly artificially engineered for the purpose of obtaining enough materials for sacrifice. Though it has not been proven yet, if there really was a source power of heaven and earth here, and a metal element one at that, then there is a 99% chance that this deduction is not wrong. Ling Han stopped his thoughts from wandering and asked Small Tower, then has this source power of heaven and earth reached a time it can be retrieved? Almost, Small Tower said. This kind of sacrifice would have to continue for at least over 1,000,000 years. Only then would the sharp air of violence drop to rock bottom. Could possibly be this time, it could also possibly need another 2 to 3 times, and only then could it be retrieved. However, success would still have to depend on fortune. Removing the air of violence was only the first step. Winning won the opportunity to show his face in front of the source power of heaven and earth, but it did not represent completely that it could be retrieved by then. However, without the opportunity to show one's face, there was even less possibility of retrieving it. Lan Ruaji said that they had only been on this island for several million years. Then, it is highly possible that they were the first to discover that this place houses the firm essence green gold, and that was why they settled down here. And then, through a great many years of study, they came up with this method of sacrifice. Though I still have not met that island master, but judging from his actions, he should be a smart man who plans before he moves. Furthermore, this alternate system of cultivation may have some other strange factor to it that could allow him to retrieve the source power of heaven and earth. I had already planned to cause a great disturbance. If I could ruin the plans of that island master for retrieving the firm essence green gold, or even if I myself could retrieve it, that would not be too bad. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He could not possibly stop this sacrificial rite. Though dividing soul tier monarch tiers were indeed very strong against an immortal palace tier, there was still no way he could match the opponent, what more when there were also ascending origin tier elites on the other side too. Even if he took out the poisonous fruit of the red-spotted green bamboo, he would still be unable to succeed. Then why not just add fuel to the fire, and he himself could retrieve the source power of heaven and earth? That was what he had decided on doing. Ling Han roared, and was just planning to push his battle prowess to full throttle when he saw a man suddenly leap over and directly send a sword slash in his direction. Die! Ling Han had a great many enemies, but to have someone he had never even seen before suddenly deliver a fatal attack against him made him feel extremely curious. He casually sent out a kick, and with a ding that sneak attacker's sword flew out of his grip. That was a pretty boy, his skin so fine that it could induce envy in a great many women. His appearance was also considerably handsome. However, he was a little weak and could only be at fourth severance at most. Ling Han's expression was calm as he asked, "Why did you want to kill me? You are my rival in love, so isn't it reasonable that I want to kill you?" That pretty boy countered, his head raised high. Rival in love? Ling Han was surprised. When did he have such a rival in love like this? Hold on, Lan Ruaji. He couldn't help but shake his head and said, "I think you have misunderstood." Really? That pretty boy made no further move and took 2 steps forwards. "You really won't try to contest with me over Ruaji?" When he uttered the last word, he suddenly moved again, his right hand forming claws as he mercilessly delivered a claw strike at Ling Han's chest. This brat was really sly. Ling Han sent out another kick, landing solidly between the legs of that pretty boy. Ow! The pretty boy immediately released a pained yowl, his body involuntarily crumbling. His hands covered his crotch as layers of cold sweat flowed down his forehead. I really could not tell that a person that looked so fair would be so black-hearted, Ling Han said. The pretty boy was already incapable of speech. This kick was not just strong in force, but also contained a sliver of regulations of heaven and earth. To Ling Han, this was just a sliver, but to a fourth severance, this tiny sliver was already earth-shattering. Veins popped on the pretty boy's forehead, and after a while, he finally said, "It's you who are too stupid. I'm stupid." Ling Han shook his head, and then sent out a punch. Pa! The pretty boy was instantly turned into a shower of blood from the blow. Since he had made a move on him, then he should have prepared himself to be killed in return. Shio, 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 shio. Another 7 people pounced out, charging towards Ling Han. Die! Though the 7 of them did not look the same, they all had one shared trait, and that was that they all looked especially handsome. Furthermore, they were all fair and smooth in complexion, every single one of them pretty boys. Fuck! These shouldn't all be Lan Ruaji's lovers, right? Ling Han felt disgust rise up in his heart. Just what kind of ridiculous conflict had he gotten himself involved in? Moreover, these lovers were a little too merciless, weren't they? They hadn't even truly met yet, and they were already wanting to kill him. Ling Han shook his head, sending out a punch. Fiery flames blazed, and instantly turned the 7 of them into dust. This also intimidated the others, and they did not dare pounce over again. They were indeed Lan Ruaji's lovers, and in Lan Ruaji's harem, her lovers were allowed to attack each other fatally. This was a kind of pleasure in Lan Ruaji's eyes as she delighted in how her lovers would fly into a rage out of jealousy in front of her, while they attacked each other violently in secret. If that hadn't been the case, the number of her lovers would have long since exceeded 100 instead of merely these dozen and some at present. Afterwards, this had become a custom. Every time there would be a new entry, all her lovers would work together to deal with him. If they could kill him, they would have one less competitor for her affections. However, this time they had clearly met their match. Ling Han was indescribably strong. This was really disgusting. Ling Han mocked endlessly. He had not thought that he had just said a few words to Lan Ruaji, and he was already embroiled in this kind of farce. If this spread out, he would definitely be laughed at and ridiculed. To think that he would actually be striving for favor with a bunch of pretty boys. Fuck! Ling Han's figure charged out, his battle prowess on full throttle. The 9 heavens flame-divided soul had also been brought into play. Fiery flames blazed, sword chi sword, and the rate of slaughter was astonishingly high. The marine creatures' attacks came in wave after wave, as if there was no end to it. To say nothing of the others, even Ling Han himself could feel a weariness rise up in him. Next shift, an austere voice rang out, and a new batch of people came out from the ancient castle, switching shifts with the people who were already completely fully expended from the battle, and continuing to battle fiercely with the marine creatures. Once everyone retreated, they collapsed onto the ground, feeling an incredible soreness in every single bone of their bodies. Ling Han also took advantage of the time to recover his origin power. He had cultivated every cultivation level to complete perfection, so he had a continuous supply of power, was far more capable of exertion than the others in the same cultivation level, and his recovery rate was also much faster. 3 days later, they had another change of shift. Qin Wei and the others were incredibly gloomy. They had not enjoyed any benefits yet, but already had to work hard. But if they didn't, it wouldn't do either. Once these marine creatures broke through the lines of defense, all of them would be dead. This was like a war that had no end. Every marine creature was fearless of death, and tried its best to barrage against the lines of defense of the island, and the island residents were also putting their all into resistance, causing Ascent Route Island to become a slaughterhouse. What reassured Qin Wei and the rest was that, at least up to the present, there were only injuries and no deaths. This was very inconceivable. Under such a powerful offensive, there were actually no deaths on their side. At first, Ling Han had not noticed, but he soon discovered this fact. Thus, he placed his attention on the others as well, and realized that it was not they that were lucky, but that when someone encountered a deadly danger, those marine creatures would die for some inconceivable reason. In such chaotic battles, this was not very obvious, but as long as one paid attention, he would definitely realize this. Ling Han couldn't help but turn and look in the direction of the ancient castle. So far, that mysterious island master still had not appeared. Perhaps it was he that was interfering from the shadows, and thus ensured that no one died. An ascending origin tier elite absolutely had that kind of ability. Why did he have to save them then? Very simple. Every single person here was a student of the alternate cultivation system, and would spread it out, so how could they be easily sacrificed? The alternate system of cultivation would cause damage to the regulations of the heaven and earth, and would be strictly forbidden by all forces. When it was taught, it had to be done secretly, and thus was in more dire need of manpower. On one side, that island master needed people to help him prepare the sacrifice, slaughtering marine creatures, and on another, he also had to protect the people here so that they could spread out that new cultivation system, and that was what led to the present situation. Linking all the cause and effect of the situation together, Ling Han thought that his deduction could explain everything very well, so he was sure that his deduction was correct. "Why is the beast tide so fierce this time?" a native complained. "That's right. In the past, it would last 2 to 3 days at most, but this time it's already been close to 10 days. If this goes on, everyone won't be able to hold on much longer. Why hasn't Lord Island Master appeared yet? With him changing the flow of the tides, we should be able to win easily." Yet Ling Han understood why in his mind. That Island Master had to be managing the ceremony for the sacrifice. Perhaps he did not trust any other person, so he did not even participate in the battles, and would only occasionally emerge to save someone. Since the time period of the beast tide this time has exceeded previous times, and Small Tower has also said that removing the murderous aura of the firm essence green gold would also need another 2 to 3 rounds of sacrifices, then it is very possible that that island master wants to succeed with this one time, and that was why he has extended the time period for the beast tide. Hee hee. Looks like I, too, should make my move.